Hey everybody, just a quick reminder before we get the episode going that your support means a great deal to me. If you are able to support the channel financially, please do go to 10percenttrue.com, hit subscribe and pick one of the packages. For £5, $6.50 a month, you get early access and ad-free access to my content. And for a little bit more than even that, you also get access to AMA and private Q&A sessions that are run directly with my guests through Zoom call at least once a quarter, probably more often than that. I'd appreciate your support. Anyway, let's get on with the episode.
You run around at 20,000 feet and all of a sudden stuff's blowing up above you. And it's like, okay, there's a reason we're up here at 30,000 feet in those areas. So that's where Intel was very effective because it's like there was this one, and we called him Big Ben because it's like he cooked off 6 or 7 rounds every hour, and it was 100 millimeter. And you go, we just marked it, and you'd be flying out there, and sure enough, you boom, boom, boom. All right, he got paid for the day. Doing it. But we found him one night with a tanker. So the tankers were getting ballsy, and they were like, "Hey, you guys, these are the guard guys, and they want to be in it. They're like, hey man, we'll drag you guys to Baghdad. Okay, that's great. So we're out there, and we all do. Again, it's all lights out, and we're all in the tanker. And of course, he's got his lights are like on level 1, and we're all in. I know there's 8 F-111s over here, and I've got 8 F-15s, and there's F-16s behind us, and of course, stack of 7 tankers, and this KC-10 is leading, and he's out front. And so as we're driving it, and all of a sudden, I look down at my INS and I go, "We're almost over Big Ben." And about that minute, boom, boom, 3 rounds go off, out in front of the KC-10. He's like, "In the turn, in the turn, in the turn." And so they turn the whole, everybody's around it. Of course, we all bail out because it's like, this is over. He didn't want to get shot. All right, this is over. And I mean, F-111, everybody's lights come on because that's the first thing. Turn your lights on so you don't run into somebody. Because, obviously we're not worried about somebody seeing, being lights out for the strike would be appropriate. But all the lights come on. And I mean, it's just a bomb burst. 50 airplanes are, going every which direction. But, okay, perhaps the tankers should stay south of the border from here on.
Opie, welcome to 10% True. It's great to see you.
Great to be here. Got my 10% True shirt on. I've got it available through friends. If anybody wants one, contact me. I'll tell you how to get it.
I normally start these. Episodes with some kind of observation about the guest or about my experiences or sort of relationship with the guest. So I'll do the same with you. You and I have been talking for probably more than 20 years. I think that was about when we first started talking, when Doug Dildy and I were writing the Eagle Engage book, where we talk about you and Coma Powell going out and completing what was arguably the most successful single engagement of Desert Storm in the F-15. And over the years, we've kept in touch. But most noteworthy, I think, for me is the fact that your story, I've probably heard you tell a couple of times, 2 or 3 times before, the last of which was when I was actually with you at your home in Florida, where you were upstaged, where midway through our conversation, some old guy walked in and started talking about flying Cobra gunships and Caribous in Vietnam. And that was the first time I'd ever seen an F-15 driver upstaged, let alone one with a couple of kills to his name. So for the audience at home, of course, I'm referring to Tom, who's Opie's dad, Vietnam vet, who was a great privilege, truly a great privilege to be able to meet him and spend some time with him. But he did indeed turn up when we were halfway through recording an interview, which we were going to put out on the podcast. So meeting Tom and spending time with him was more important. So this is really us getting back together and starting from scratch, because obviously it wouldn't make sense to start in the middle to talk about your Mig Kill. So on which note, I did put a note out saying that it was a MiG-21 and a MiG-23, and you've corrected me and said it was 2 MiG-23s. So we'll obviously get to the details, and hopefully you'll be able to fill us in on what happened there. Before we go for it, though, and start with you talking about what you were doing before you got to Bitburg, or how you got to Bitburg and then ended up going to war in the F-15, just for the audience at home, if you are listening to this on early access, thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. Thanks for taking the time out and spending your money in order to get early access and ad-free viewing of these interviews. If you've bought the top tier, then congratulations, because Opie is going to be with you, or you'll be with Opie virtually through a Zoom call in September, where you'll have the opportunity to put your questions to him. So I hope this interview is enlightening for you. I hope it provides you with pause for thought, and it gives you an opportunity to think about the questions that you want to put to Opie when he's live on our Q&A in September. And if you're listening to this and there's loads of adverts and you didn't get early access, then that's absolutely fine. I hope you're enjoying it. I don't ever ask you to put your hand in your pocket if you can't afford to. But if you do enjoy this and you think that Opie's story is worth spreading, and it absolutely is, then please like and share this, drop a comment, make the algorithm work for the channel, and help get it out to a wider audience. Right, anyway.
And from the audience, I'd like to say how much we appreciate the stories, and we know all the effort and work you put into it. Hence a subscription. It's not profit driven. It's you got to cover base expenses, you know. So I mean, just from us, the stories are immaculate across the board, all of the different military and versions. And I mean, the fact that you take the time to gather those and then to give us the opportunity to watch them is incredible, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Opie. Thanks. I'm a Brit, so I'm not very good at taking compliments. So I had to throw it back at you and say it's all down to the guests like you, for telling the stories. Okay, so let's tell some stories then, or you tell me some stories. So we can tell, obviously, from my introduction and the fact probably your name is well known for anybody really who's studied the Eagle for even a short period of time, or air warfare for a short period of time. They'll know your name. Tell us a bit about your background. How did you get into flying the Eagle? What were you doing up until the point where you ended up going to fly the Eagle at Bitburg in Germany?
I was a military brat, so joining the military was no question. I mean, I was not pushed, but my dad was a pilot, and I was very exposed. He had 4 tours in Vietnam, and I mean, as he was a battalion commander, we were sitting on a firepower display, and the Cobras are out there, and the first thing that starts is 2 F4s drive through and drop napalm across this field. And I went, that's what I'm going to do. And so I always had an attachment to the F4 through all those years. And then went to Auburn, went to pilot training. And while I was at pilot training, my first IP was Abdullah Finazza, who was a Jordanian exchange. And he was an F5 pilot. And he took us out, and like on our dollar ride and some other, and he goes, what do you want to do? And I go, I want to fly fighters. And he goes, okay. And he does some, let's say, some different maneuvers and things, but he goes, these are the things you need to get used to. And so it was just all the way down the line. Coming out of UPT, I was able to get an F-15. And I got an F-15 to Eglin. That was my first choice, and that's what I got. And showed up here on December 14th, 1984, after going through, all the transitions. Just a slew. I'm going to give you a lot of shout outs to all the guys, but to say up front, Cheese Grater, Mongo Robbins, Tex Merrill, Blade Armstrong, Magoo Walter, just all of these just high quality. And there's going to be a bunch I forget. SkyMo, my initial IPs were all Vietnam F4 drivers at Luke at the Triple Nickel. Rocky Coons, Arnie Tan, and a bunch of guys like that. And then SkyMo and some others who were the young F-15 guys. And just the standards that they upheld. But I mean, it set it all the way along the way. So my first assignment was at Eglin. I was actually in the 58th and showed up as a brand new second lieutenant. And because I graduated, pinned on, and went straight to UPT, as opposed to usually there's a delay, I was a second lieutenant for 2 full years. So I flew the F-15 as a second lieutenant for a year, almost a year and a half before, So if you're the second lieutenant or you're the youngest guy in the squadron, you're the snacko. And to all the snackos out there, we appreciate what you do. We make sure the beer's cold, the T-shirts are good looking and fit, and et cetera. And so I've been a snacko my whole life, it seems like. But, showing up at Eglin, again, some Cheetah Green, Paco, my first time with the Red Eagles, I flew against Paco in a MiG-21, who later came back as the wing weapons officer and then subsequently the 58th Squadron Commander. Cheetah and Paco flew in the 58th in F-4s in Vietnam. So this circle of life and the experiences and everything, it just kept reinforcing all along the way. So even being a baby Eagle driver, sitting back and listening to a lot of those stories, Mark DeBolt, and I'll quit throwing all the names out. But I mean, these guys that just, number one, they were hammers because there was a standard and you had to uphold the standard. And in my first 4 rides in my checkout program at Eglin, I flew with Bob Chapman, Jeff Coe, Moon Ross, who was an F-15 instructor. Not much longer after that, we had just several of the F-15 IPs from the weapons school were visiting, and I kept getting to fly with them. And it's like, man, the standard is here. So we were always being pushed to meet the standard, and we had a group of lieutenants. And so just for Clouseau, for those who've watched the Clouseau thing, as I left, Clouseau had showed up about 3 to 6 months before I was leaving, E.T. Murphy, and just, that whole slew of bodies. And I think out of a 4-year period, we probably had 13 guys from the 58th that went to weapons school. So I was there from, like I said, 84. I left in March 88, went to Bitburg. And the 60th, as we have discussed, the 60th had the MSIP F-15s. They brought them in, they got it all set up, and then they took those 24 airplanes or 27 airplanes and shipped them to Bitburg, to the 53rd. And Mongo Robbins and I and some others, as the program was really coming to Eglin, those F-15s, but they're, now they're obviously going to go to Kadena and Bitburg and around the world. And we were able to work a deal where they were going to bring X number of Eglin people, because it's a new aircraft, it's got new systems, a lot of digital, et cetera, and to bring us in because we have been flying it since Bitburg is, as Clouseau was saying, you're tip of the spear, you're sitting alert. We expect to meet combat with the Russians, and we don't want to just drop these new airplanes on them with no experience. And so Chip Keener was the 60th guy that was going. He gets picked up for weapons school. While he's at weapons school, they decide he's going to stay and go to the 422, which is a test squadron. So they go, we need a guy right now. And my squadron commander, Dan Reisinger, calls me and he goes, hey, what do you think about Bitburg? I go, I'm ready. I'm packed. Tell me when. And of course, my wife hated it. I mean, she didn't hate Bitburg. She hated the fact that I was already like out the door within 30 seconds. It's like, I always have a bag ready to go. You tell me where. And so I was able to go to Bitburg and then stayed there, obviously, through Desert Storm, in which case, this is fast forward, as that was coming up, I had an assignment to go back to Nellis as a F-15 weapons school instructor. And when that tasking came down, the squadron commander, Randy Bigham, said, he goes, hey, all this stuff's going on in the desert. He goes, this is in October. We knew we had orders that we were going to deploy in December if things continue. And he said, it's up to you. You've got orders to Nellis. I'm not going to hold you back. If you want to go to Nellis, I'll sign that. I'll sign your slip. If you want to stay. And I said, man, I didn't train my whole life to get in the Super Bowl. You think I'm going to go back to the schoolhouse when I can, and he said, we may go down there and sit on our ass for 6 months or, and do nothing. I said, well, I'll be sitting there right next to you. So that's kind of the progression. So I got to Bitburg and showed up. We were, being from Eglin, they called us the E-boys. So we'll talk about some differences between USAF and ACC now, but it was TAC. So you had TAC standards and what we did, and then you had USAF and Kadena, PACAF, and they all had. It's amazing that we were all stationed at those different places, but the culture is so different. I mean, the standards are the same, but the culture, because of your wartime tasking and the different types of missions you get to do and the different places you train, really create some differences. And so when we show up, we're the E-boys because we're from Eglin. It's like we beat it to death. It's a fixed scenario and everything. And I know Clouseau, who I was also in a band with, he plays lead guitar and I played drums. We did that together in Hawaii. But one of the things he always said, he said, it's in Kadena, when you're raging across Korea, you kind of show up, you don't always know what your airspace is going to be. And in Germany, you took off, you might or might not have airspace, but they had the slow fly system as all the Europeans. And I mean, you've got, at the time, 1988, we had 40 squadrons between the RAF and the Italians and the Germans and the U.S. Air Force, and in the size of the state of Georgia. So, I mean, there was always somebody airborne, especially for the Americans, because we flew all day long, whereas everybody else just flew the morning go and they flew an afternoon go, and they took a break for lunch. And they go, yep, there's the Americans out there beaming around at lunchtime looking for somebody to fight. So, but you got very used to just being in an area, and you check in, you would, check in on TAD 314, which was kind of the GCI common, and go, any radar, I'm here to play, and I got 45 minutes of gas. And they'd start snap, snap, snap. So it was really sort of a out of pocket. You didn't have a set area. You worked fight to fight to fight. Whereas everything in TAC was so straightforward. I mean, we knew the airspace. We had a scenario set up, pretty much what we actually did in Iraq. We knew where our caps were. We knew where the targets were. And we set up things. But even then, we were able to roam and destroy. Once we, had total air superiority, it was like, well, if we think, it's like going fishing. Well, they're not biting here. Let's go see if we can find some over here, and able to do that. So having all of those cultures within the community, and I know I got down the track here, but back to, I arrived at Bitburg, and it was pretty totally different from what I was used to. But within a couple months, I got picked up for weapons school. I went back and did the weapons school for 6 months or 4 months at the time. I show back up, and now it's get now we're on a we're not on wartime. We are on a wartime footing, peacetime, wartime, just being prepared for the Russians. Basically we were full to gap fillers, and NATO was the big dog, and how we coordinated with everybody, and getting to know all the different NATO partners that we worked with, and all the different exercises, and learning that process. So that was what I had done for 3 years. And then I'm fixing to step out the door, and we transitioned to CENTAF, which, back to CENTAF, and show up in the desert. Now, obviously, they didn't want, I don't know if it was General Horner or who knows within the circle powers that be, but we actually got tasked to go down to CENTAF. So they had the 1st Fighter Wing and the 33rd Fighter Wing, and then we got put at Al-Qars. So we had the Central Quarter. And then later on, the USAF guys were pushing hard, and they were like, well, we're deploying to Incirlik anyway. We don't care if you're going to let us in. But, eventually they wound up being able to run missions out of Incirlik, and did a great job. It was great to have. Basically, we took, whatever it was, 36 latitude north. You guys got it. Just take care of Kirkuk and everything there. So.
Hey everybody, it's Steve, sponsoring myself. Hey, if you'd like to support 10% True, I'd really appreciate it. You can visit 10percenttrue.com and take a look at the shop page. There's patches and stickers and shirts and things on there. But more importantly, there's my books, including this one, Be Afraid of the Dark, Strike Eagle Story Part 1. That is currently taking pre-orders. It's going to ship in September of 2025. If it's already September 2025, or that's in the past, then please go and grab a copy. I'll send it out to you ASAP. Many thanks for your support. Opie, let's go back then just for a minute before we talk about the actual deployment. Let me ask you a few questions around about your preparation for going to war, and some of the things that you were doing at Bitburg. So you slotted into the conversation pretty nonchalantly the fact you'd flown against the MiG-21 as part of your exposure and constant peg. Parker was flying that aeroplane. Everybody who is listening, I'm sure, will be familiar with the 4477th if you're not, buy my book, and you will become familiar with it. But of course, that's the program the Air Force set up to expose the TAF, the Tactical Air Forces, to the threat. I just wanted to see if you would just recount your experience in brief around that. Then, what level of proficiency did you have when you took part in that? What did you get out of it? Did you feel then when you went to Iraq 3 years later, 4 years later, whenever it was, that you were better equipped, better prepared? Did you feel more confident because you'd had that exposure?
Absolutely.
Just to tell us a little bit about the experience.
I had just gotten mission qualified, so it's March '85, and the week I get done, we're leaving on a deployment to Nellis. So I mean, I literally have less than 50 hours at Eglin flying the F-15, and we're going on a deployment to Nellis, and it's like, this is great. I've never been to Nellis. I haven't been to Red Flag, anything like. So the airspace is new. The concept of being TDY at that point is actually pretty new. You know, okay, we're deploying in and we're going to fight. We're going to, you know, DACT. And so we get there and they take us all into the auditorium. And of course you've got there's a hangar that's got toys in it, you know, at the time, and you can't say anything and you sign your life away, et cetera, et cetera. So you go through the whole process. And, you know, of course we're talking on secure phones, and they give us the full, you know, like we get in on a Sunday morning, they give us the full brief. This is what's going on. And there's probably 100 guys in there. And I mean, it's our squadron and another squadron and a bunch of Navy and Marine guys. And of course they bring them in because there's a lot of missions going on at the same time. And so get briefed up the next day, and you brief face to face for one guy, and then you go out and you fly, and then you debrief over the phone, and then you brief on the phone for the next day with somebody else, and he flies it, and then you get to debrief in person. So I flew the first was just the see one, do one, or type thing where, you know, AAC handling, a few brake turns and stuff like that. And that was Paco. And it's a very, you know, it's a very scripted. I wish I could have gotten to fight him. Of course, I wouldn't have been ready at that time. And then I flew against Hound Dog White, who was the squadron commander, who was probably the weakest guy out there. So I was feeling like King Kong at the time. And I had Punch Moulton in my back seat. So I had my CNI flight commander, because they're like, you can't go out there by yourself. You know, you don't even know how to get to the airspace. So, but getting to go out and do that, so impactful, because it's, you know, as always, U.S. Intel, no offense to U.S. Intel, they make every threat is 10 foot tall. The ETATs, you know, it's like, did y'all ever turn the radars around and see what we're doing? Because I know they're doing a post hole and this and that. It's like, we're doing wagon wheels and all kind, you know. So Intel has, and all through that initial training, you know, the MiG-23 is the killer and it's going to take you out. And the MiG-21 is going to take you out. And to be able to get out there, it is a great performance. And of course, flown by Paco and all the other guys. You know, I can't think of everybody's names who I knew that flew with them. It can be an incredible airplane, but I mean, the same thing. There's Navy guys that fly A4s that can be King Kong against F-16s. You know, they just flown right. Any airplane can be a killer. But to be able to see it right there, you know, right next to you, and get over that buck fever. And I mean, you know, at the time for me, it was the same thing fighting an F-16 or an A7 or anything else. It was new, and you didn't know how it was going to turn. You knew what the F-15 did because everything we fought against was the F-15. So to be able to see it, and when they take you through the process and show you, I can look like I can shoot you, but I'm, you know, and that's Paco. He goes, watch this, whack, whack, and he's pointing his nose, but he's falling the whole time. You know, like he's not able to employ a weapon. And knowing that just took, I don't want to say it takes loads of pressure off, but it's like, hey, they're real. They have rivets all over their wings. They can't make soap. Don't think they're 10 foot tall. You know, you still have to be good, because our whole plan is that we're, you know, for NATO, for Europe, we had to be able, 3 to 1 was our minimum kill ratio. So knowing what we had, it's like, don't be afraid. You can get in there and mix it up and do it. And I think that really, for me, laid the groundwork for everything that I learned and taught to other, you know, pilots as we went through. It's like, hey, they're not, you know, they're not King Kong, and they don't get to train as much. They don't train like we do. They don't have the systems that we do. We have the capabilities. So, but it's up, you still have to use this part. You know, the best weapon we have out there, you know, the best receptor was our eyes, and the best weapon was your brain to employ. And that's why we've always said the Eagle is so easy to fly and hard to employ, because you have so many, you know, things you can do, and all the different weapon zones and everything. And that's the critical part. And a couple of guys that you interviewed, like the Hornet, you know, the Hornet was kicking the Eagle's ass all the time. It's like, well, anybody can kick anybody's butt any given day. You know, everybody has a bad day, but being able to know the threat and knowing what you can do against it, that I think it was the way Paco tells the story, and in the book as well. You know, it's like, it was 1986, 85, 86, the budget. And they said, we'll offer up constant pay because they'll never cancel that. And it's gone. they're like, okay, you want that off the budget. And I mean, that was just a loss of such a great program
Yeah.
That we lost as far as adversaries. Whereas later on, I know post Desert Storm, we looked at getting MiG-29. There were companies, in which there are now, that fly all the adversary aircraft, and I think that training is immeasurable. Uh, what it does for all the guys being able to fly DACT for every mission, or not wasting Eagle v Eagle or F-35 v F-35 sorties where you're always fighting something that you should be able to whip. And I talk to these guys flying T-38s, they still get in untargeted sometimes because you're training young guys how to do it, and if you don't punish their mistakes, then those can go down the road. But anyway, so Red Eagles was high quality.
Tell me a bit more then, Opie, about the culture. It's interesting to hear you talk about the fact that you guys all going through the guerrillas or the crows out at Eglin, lots of weapons school guys. It makes me think about, I visited the Missouri Air National Guard 15 years ago, and they had about 10 colonels, they had about, all with about 3,000 or 4,000 Eagle hours. And it was just an insane level of experience just in that one small unit. And it kind of reminds me of that type of thing. So I'm curious to understand, whenever I talk to any of the Eglin bunch, you, Sly McGill, Parco, Cluzo, any of the Eglin guys, it feels like you were sort of the superhero type squadron. I mean, the superhero type wing. And then I think, well, was the first fighter wing the same? And were the guys at Schusterberg? I mean, there obviously is. It's only one squadron at Schusterberg, a small unit as well, 18 PAA or something like that. Did anybody else at Kadena have the same kind of thing? Were you really exclusive in the level of expertise and the number of fighter weapons school guys that were flowing through those two units at that time?
I think part of it is yes, because of guys like Paco and Cheetah, and we had some combat experience in there, and because of our airspace, I mean, you can't argue with the Gulf of America, the Whiskey 470, Whiskey 470, and all. I mean, just unlimited surface to the moon. I mean, kind of like Nellis, 500 feet, but over water, supersonic, able to go as fast as we want. Pretty much any mission that we were out there when we had that airspace. Obviously, we have overland airspace too, but I mean, being able to set up when the aggressors came out, we were flying 4v6, 6v8, 4v. I mean, if we could get 4v12, and because of guys like Dallas Thompson, the weapons officers that we had. I mean, like I said, Moon Ross, and when they would come out, because we had so many visitors like that, and that was due to guys like Paco and Cheetah, and they had all been aggressors. And so, I mean, it seemed like we had the aggressors in every 3 months for a while, and we set up, and they weren't instructors, but they allowed us to go through a 2v1 or 2v2, and I mean, we kept reiterating the building block program. So I think where your answer is where did Clouseau come from? Howie Thompson, Dallas Thompson, he came from Bitburg. He was Bitburg weapons officer. He comes in. So all of those experiences that came in that just kept building on that Kmart Kresge, the only guy that I know that went through weapons school never busted a ride. This is the standard. And it's one of those that we didn't know anything different. It was like, I mean, you did 12, you didn't leave early. I mean, sometimes we begged out to go to the gym type thing, like, well, I need to go work out, but I don't want to leave the weapon shop. And everybody was fighting to get that experience. And at the same time, I really want to throw kudos out. Mongo Robbins, who was at St. Louis with you, Killer Miller, Blade Armstrong. Blade was a bodybuilder, but he was also a great fighter pilot. He wound up flying F-16s and doing some other stuff, but he was so good at it. But instead of being like, hey, I don't have time for you, you'd ask him a question, he'd whip out his book. I mean, he had the notebook with everything he had learned, and he would work with you. And, everybody made everybody better. They didn't let you get away with slacking off. I mean, that was one of the things that when I got to Bitburg, the lieutenants, they'd fly their mission and they would disappear. And I'm like, where'd they go? I mean, we were, if we weren't flying, we were sitting in the brief or sitting in the debrief, or, it was like, you didn't miss an opportunity to learn something. If they had, every time that weapons school guy was there, his briefing was in the auditorium, so that everybody got the brief. Only 4 guys were flying, but we all watched the briefing. Buzzard Thomas,
Wow.
George Buzzard Thomas. So, and like I said, because those guys that came from USAF and PAC-F that came in, names escape me right now, but there were so many, and we were fat with target arms too, so to speak. We had a lot of weapons school grads in the 3 squadrons, and it was like it just kept getting more and more because of the standard they set. And just be like them, do what they do, work hard, fly good, and then put your package in. And I know for a while, and then Eglin went through a dry period. There were several years Eglin didn't get a weapons officer.
Right.
I mean, didn't get somebody picked up. And it was just, you only get 6 per class, and there were only 2 classes a year. There used to be 3, and then they went to 2. And I mean, people flowed through, and it was just one of those things. The standard was, if there's a question, there's no question. So that happened at weapons school, but it happened, and they were great instructors. They just didn't, it wasn't the guy that you want at that level taking care of the squadron. Because we see the weapons officer as the senior IP, or the, keeping all the IPs online, academics and otherwise, of what we're doing.
So here's a question that winds many years into the future in your career, but you carried on flying the F-15 after Desert Storm, and I don't know if you were a lieutenant colonel when you retired, you were still flying the Eagle, but you flew it, I think, most of your career, right?
Yes.
In the
Say
again?
I was a colonel. Yeah.
You were a colonel. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in the sort of continuum,
you can buy it. You just buy the rank.
in the continuum of your career, was that period of time then sort of the golden age of flying the Eagle? Did you look back at it wistfully? Did the things that you saw, that you admired, the behaviors that you exhibited and that you believed were the right things to exhibit, did they continue in your career? Did the way that Eagle drivers come up through the pipeline change? How do you look back on it?
There was a short period of when they were banking pilots. And so we were getting guys from C-130s that wanted to be, had been fighter qualified, but they got a C-130 or a 141 or a KC-10. And then later on for their next assignment, then they get an F-15. Well, a guy that's learned to fly a C-130 at 130 miles an hour is not, they had the hardest problem making the transition. We were getting A-10 guys. Some of them were really good. Caesar, for instance, was an A-10 guy, and they made the transition. Some of them just couldn't. It's just a very divergent mission compared to what we do. So during that period, it was hard, but we washed a lot of people out. And the RTU, because of like that period, being in Clouseau and post Desert Storm, all of those guys who are now the young captains that are leading their squadrons have grown up under that same standard that we grew up under and reinforced. And they weren't letting anything pass the door that they didn't think was up to speed. And so at pilot training, it was nobody wanted to fight her because they didn't want to wash out of the RTU training.
Really?
So I think it just kept getting better. And obviously the jets got better. We went through some hard years parts wise. I mean, candlelizing, and you'd schedule a 12-10 and you'd get a 10-6 or whatever. But those were some hard years. But the sims got better, the systems got better, and I think the standard and to take that group, all those colonels at St. Louis, like I said, Mongo Robbins and all. I mean, when you've got 11 lieutenant colonels in a squadron, and they're all still acting like captains and can fly as good as they did. I mean, I felt, I got to be honest, when I was in 06, I was flying, there were, through the period of time, I wanted to be on the step. When I came along, if the colonel came down and flew, you just wanted him to get to the airspace and get home and not kill himself. And it became different, but we had great leaders like LD Johnson and, like I said, Cheeto, Paco. Paco you flew against him, you knew you were going to get your butt kicked. So, and it didn't matter what part of his career that was at. So I think that allowed us to hold that standard. And I've got to be honest, when I stepped away, obviously the F-22 was coming in, but with the briefings and, we were so far beyond, because basically we were doing crayon and chalk. And of course, chalk is very historical, and doing your debriefs, 8 pieces of chalk, and here's the 8 ship, and breaking them out. But man, these kids, they just got better and better and better. And it was exciting to see what they could do. And then, of course, the radars change and the systems get better. And that was I remember I was doing an AMRAAM test, and they were like, well, do you want a bigger propellant or do you want a bigger warhead? And we go, well, I want both. And I'd been at Hughes when the first AMRAAMs came out, and we're going through it. I mean, they're using Radio Shack green circuit cards that were flexing. Well, they started out with ceramic cards, and those ceramic cards were breaking up when the missile would fire. And so, of course, it's not doing everything it could. And then they transitioned to the green circuit cards that can handle the flex and whatever. And some Hughes / Raytheon guy is going to try to correct this to me later. But as they got better, it allowed more. The missile is this big, but as things kept getting miniaturized, smaller and smaller, they were able to make it, more power, bigger warhead, better warhead, et cetera, and better guidance system. It's never going to get bigger than this, but that's with what they were able to do. And it's allowed. That's why the F-15EX, I remember I was flying Southwest with a guy who was working with the test, and he just said, it's everything we wanted 40 years ago. We're bringing it, which is what the F-15 was, everything we wanted in the F-4. And they, it was F-4 guys that helped fix all of these things. And now it's like, well, here's all the systems or capabilities. I want 12 missiles or 16 missiles, or, because that was what we always ran out. I could stay up there all day. We proved that, fly 15-hour missions. But if I run out of missiles or run out of oxygen, then I'm just doing a demo. I may as well be a Thunderbird.
Yeah. Okay, tell us then about so we talked about MSIP, and I've had, Parker talked about MSIP, and I think Cluzo did as well, and maybe Marco McCaffrey was another guest who did not go to Desert Storm, but he flew the Eagle. I think he talked about MSIP as well. So we don't need to do a big sort of
Right.
discussion around MSIP, but you did say you didn't want to drop all those new jets and that new technology on a bunch of guys at Bitburg who didn't really understand it. Can you expound on that a little bit? Bearing in mind that there are still some things about MSIP that are not declassified, but the things that you can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. The best example is, it's like going from a flip phone to an iPhone. I mean, you had the flip phone and you could dial numbers, and you can do the whatever T9, and you could figure things out. And that was the type of the armament control and the way the defensive and offensive systems and the radar. And all of a sudden, when they got the much larger central computer, it became, and Wayne Waller, kudos to Wayne Waller, with Hughes building the APG-63, and there were so many things that were fixed pretty much like Herb Kelleher over a whiskey. Like, well, Wayne, why can't we do this? And Tex Merrill is, well, how come we can't see the altitude? He goes, well, it knows what altitude. You don't have to lock them up. Well, why can't you tell us that? He goes, yeah, okay, well, because the processors were better. So there was just so much more data. And that was the thing, is, your brain can only absorb so much at a time. Of course, these kids now that are playing, PlayStation, Xbox, et cetera, you think of all the things that they're taking in one view, and they're doing it with 6 buttons. We're doing the same thing in the F-15, the F-16, et cetera, between the panels, all of the digital representations, and your HOTAS, hands-on throttle and stick. So now you double click this switch and hit this switch, you get a certain thing. And if you push this and double that, or you kick it to the left and hit that, you're getting all of these different actions that are taking place. And that's what they were picking up. So when we go in there, it's like, okay, you have this digital screen now that you can do 100 more things. Now, interpretively, it's much easier, but because of what we had come from, analog dialing in, you used to have to dial aim 7 to aim 9. If it didn't come, it was supposed to come up automatically, but you had to check that. You had to manually cool your missiles. You had to, there were you had to tune, you could retune your aim 7. Oh, my aim 7 didn't tune. There was, you could go in and double switch, double clutch, and hit something and make it work. And it was years of the young guys figuring these things out. I mean, we had with the radar before we got the upgraded radar, you would have a 40-mile scope, and you were in a long range search. And when your targets got inside of 40 miles, you came back to MRM or to SRM, so which is medium. So you had a high PRF, you came back to medium PRF, you reached down on the scope, you went from 40 scope down to 20, back to 40, and that forced it into medium PRF so that you could see these guys as they're turning in the beam. But I mean, you're doing all this heads down stuff every time, and you just became so used to it. Now it's all automatic, So we fixed all those things, and then it added so many other capabilities, and that was it's like, hey, they don't, they're not taking away any of their combat capability. They're on the line. World War III may kick off tomorrow. So when we went in there, it was, you upgraded, as you got the first 4 jets, you started training their pilots, and that's what we were doing. So knowing that 24 jets or their full complement was coming. So they were feeding us in. So you had enough people that if you needed to fly those jets, and then as we transitioned, we trained everybody. And like I said, between the armament control systems and the radar and the integration, and we added all the chaff flare dispensers and things. And oh my God, here's how you did, not like they didn't drop flares and chaff in Vietnam, but because the Eagle had never done it. If you haven't done it, you have to be instructed on how to do it. You can't just whatever. It's the military way to say. It wasn't that hard, but I mean, knowing it, and of course, it opens a whole new. We had the tens. I mean, you had large flares and smaller flares and all the different chaff bundles. And I mean, we used to take these little cardboard boxes of chaff, and you would go out and hand it to the crew chief, and some people would tape them up, extra tape, and the crew chief would raise the speed brake and put them in, and you'd usually lose it because you do a speed brake check while you're doing your pre-flight. Whoop, there went my chaff, because you're like, okay, I got chaff, don't raise the speed brake. But your first join up, if you threw the speed brake up, it's like, there went my chaff. So I mean, you had one bundle.
Wow.
And so I mean, that now we have that full system added, which also means the more ammo guys have to deal with it, the weapons guys have to load it. We have come up with our training standards and stuff. So all of those things were happening at the same time. And that taking all that into consideration is why it was, a perfect follow-on is when we first got JTIDs. So we had JTIDs, and then we had, with the data link and able to do that. That scope, they put the MPCD or the digital, and when you were able to see that was added in all of these other capabilities. You're looking at, how do I get on the network? And like I said, things that we just take for granted now, but at the time, you had to get a training mission. You had to do a simulator. We had to have instructors come in, and this is how you get up on the net. And this is, if you fall out, this is how you reacquire. And this is the systems and what you're going to see. So it's just like everything else we do. It's a stepping stone to get everybody up to speed as quick as possible. And, you didn't need a full up instructor pilot to do it. You just needed somebody who's like, it's so much easier to learn. You've already done it. Okay, how did that work for you? And go, as opposed to reading 6 manuals and written by engineers. No offense, engineers, you guys build great stuff. I hope you're watching.
Well, they'll comment if they're not happy with that. Tell us, Soapy, then a little bit more about getting ready to go to war. Then, so August 1990 is when Saddam invades Kuwait. The first fighter wing is there, I think, within 4 days or 2 days or something like that. They're very, very fast, very rapidly deployed to Saudi to make sure there's no further advance or to deter any further advance. What's happening at Bitburg? I mean, it's interesting because Muddy Watrous was on the channel. Muddy talked about he went up to Incirlik, as you described, those guys at Schusterberg saying, we're coming, whether you like it or not. But he was talking about there being some uncertainty as to who would go, and then there were sort of cliques almost that formed between the guys who were going to go and the guys who weren't going to go, and it sounded very troublesome for all concerned. What was it like at Bitburg? How did things pan out for you?
Well, I want to take one step back because it was up to August. We had William Tell coming up, so the air-to-air competition, and I can't remember we hadn't done it for a couple of years, and they decided they were going to do it. So, and Eglin was king of William Tell. You know, Eglin had won '84 and '86, Kmart and Howie and all those guys. So Bitburg had decided we're going to win this, and they picked this five, three target arms. It was Zane Lowry, who nickel for Zane, Killer Miller, nickel for Killer, Frankie Jensen, and myself. So it was Zane, Frankie, Killer was number 3, and I'm number 4. And we deployed 6 jets up to Schusterberg. So I was drinking beer with Muddy up at the 32nd. So we are flying 2-3 times a day. So you've taken all of your weapons officers and you deploy your best jets and your best maintenance, and we're all sitting at Schusterberg, going to Amsterdam every night, flying, shooting live bullet. I mean, we shot dart every day. We were shooting dart because part of it, shooting the gun is going to be part of it where you do there's a profile. We're doing 4B20s. We've got all this because that's one of the profiles. So we have all this DACT, B-52s, KC-130, Strikers, F-15E, well, not F-15Es, F-4s, Germans, they got all these different guys to come through because you had to ID them and then shoot them. And you only had, we had X number of missiles and being able to take all of that out. So we're doing that every day. And we still have to make our sortie count. So we had shot that morning. This is a Friday. And then we did some type of 2v2 mission, and we land in England, and we're downtown London when we see on the news that that's happened. So Zane picks up the phone, he calls command post and goes, "Hey, we see what's going on. What do we need to do? Do you want us to come in?" And they said, "No, you're on 12-hour alert." Okay, do we not drink? Should we get back to the base, prep the jets, whatever? And they're like, "No, you're fine. Just call in every 12 hours. So we do what we do. We have a great time running around England. I can't remember. I think we were at Bentwaters, but we were at Bentwaters or Lake and Heath. We were in London at the time. And we come back, and on Sunday, we fly back, and they said, "All right, fly the sorties you have booked for tomorrow, and then pack everything up and come back." William Tell's canceled because now Eglin has deployed. So, 3 days later or whatever it was. So Eglin's going. So we get back, and now, like you said, at Bitburg, we're going, through the process. Well, it turns out the 53rd is on the tasking order. So we're on the ATO to go, and it's going to be the 53rd. Well, of course, the wing is, "Oh my God, we need to, but we need to have all of these guys." And there were a lot of politics involved to a certain degree, but to Randy Bigham's credit, he goes, "I'm taking lieutenants. I'm taking my squadron." So what was driving it was the resources, the logistics, and that's what drove a lot of what was in the desert. We got all these Army guys, and we got all of these, the Navy's out here, and X number of units. We only have X amount of water and food and services, and the camps are this big, and so everything was being sort of driving the plan. Now, obviously, they've been working on this plan for years and years. There's some CENTAF plan. There's a plan for Korea. There's a plan for here. No plan has ever met war, correctly. So now all of a sudden the reality's hitting the fan and what I do have to say is the stuff that appeared, camouflage tent, desert tan tents, we had never even thought about going to the desert. And, of course, CENTAF, they have all those air conditioners and food service and all the thing, the portables, and they're building corrugated buildings on the fly. It looks like World War II all over again. How they did it, it was amazing. But so while that's going on, that's why they're trying to determine. We know we're taking 24 jets. That's a given. But how many pilots? Well, Eglin took 30. So, they were told, minimize your footprint because, of course, they were in an actual city with dorms. They didn't have to build tents. They had water, but they took 30. We were looking at the tasking to go, well, we've got to fly 24/7. Here's what our, of course, peacetime pilot rest is a lot more than wartime pilot rest. Everything's waivable. But trying to build it in so that, your mission planning time and everything like that. So we had the dirty 30. That's what we started out with. So it was like, we're taking 30. And then they kept saying, well, man, we really need, of course, all the lieutenant colonels wanted to go, so, you need this guy, you need a plans officer, and we need this, we need, so it became the sporty 40. For a while, it got up to the nifty 50. So, and the names were changing every day. But what we did within the 53rd, and it finally came down to the sporty 40, but it was like, okay, we're taking the 53rd guys, mostly everybody, unless they were in MQT or relatively very new, although Coma had less than 150 hours, several guys. And that was one of Big's things. And later on, when I was at Eglin, to fast forward, when we were deploying for OIF, and it was like, all the weapons officers want to go. And I go, we have missions for everybody. And I mean, that squadron is tasked. They happen to be on the hook right now. They're taking their guys. That's what they train for. I'm not going to, overload and put all your best guys, because, what we need to have is, you got to have some lieutenants that get that experience, because it may be 15 years down the road before somebody else goes to war. So you want them to see that. I mean, it's not to cut in everybody. I mean, I wanted to send everybody, of course. And that's what, Biggs is like, hey, we'll take all comers, but we're not trying to fence you out. This is what they're telling us we have. And he goes, and I'm not cutting out all of my young guys to make room for all the colonels or lieutenant colonels or whatever. And they were all great guys. But once we figured that out, we set up just like Clouseau did. I mean, we did paired 4 ships, and we flew all of our training from October on as part of that paired 4 ship. So whatever missions you were doing, and we had sort of an initial air order of battle, and we knew we were going to have to fly at night, and we knew we were going to be doing large force employment. But I mean, we didn't have the actual plane. It was still TSSCI, et cetera. They weren't releasing, and it was actually because it was still being built on a daily basis as they kept adding in, all the different parts to it. But we had an outline. And so Big said, build a training plan. And so Vegas Dietz and Vegas and I had been lieutenants together at Eglin. This is bringing that back. So we had done, and then we'd gone to weapons school together. And in fact, Vegas, I, and Cheese were all in the same weapons school class. So Cheese is over at Tabuk. I'm at Alcarge with Vegas. So when we land in theater, Langley and Eglin, Vegas goes to Langley. I fly over to Tabuk, and Chief Matos meets me at the top of the ladder, and I go in. I had Christmas dinner with Cheese and all the guys, and Clouseau, and then went over and sat with him and JB. JB and I had been at Bitburg together before JB came back to Eglin. So, I mean, again, we all knew each other. We all knew kind of what the strengths and everything going on. So we were able to communicate at that level. And again, like Clouseau, everybody had sort of different ways that they set it up. Tonic was the new squadron commander. Tonic handed it off to Clouseau and said, do it. Biggs was more hands-on. I mean, he gave us, here's the stuff, but here's what I want to happen. And he was very hands-on to everything. I mean, we didn't do any planning that he wasn't a part of. And then I'm not sure exactly how they did it at Langley. Langley was kind of on their own. No offense to those guys, but Job Handy and all the rest of it, they were dealing with different issues that they had over there. One of the most significant for us was when we were leaving to come down, we had all our jets. We had 2 tubs, two-seaters, D models. And one of them was a spare. I mean, one of them wasn't going, and one of them was a spare, an airborne spare. And Big said, if we are at 24 jets, that jet better fall in the water before you bring the tub. And so it was like, hey, nobody's calling out. We're going. So the guy in the 2-seater is going like, guess what? You're not going to make this trip. You'll fly down later. And it saved us so much hassle of flying congressmen and generals and VIPs and people who just want to come in and fly up north of the border and do that. So, I mean, that was something I learned. That's why F-22s are single seat. F-35s are single seat. It's like that. I mean, we love the capability to be able to give those people rides at certain times, but in the middle of the war zone is not, when you want to have to do that. So that was an aside. So once we get into theater, well, I'm already into theater. Can we go back to the training as we were doing it? So Biggs, we had the tasking, and I had actually moved up to wing weapons, had Kip Hunter, who had flown combat in South America. I mean, F-86. He was one of the guys fighting with the embedded and some other things. A lot of great stories, and he had flown F-4s, a little bit of aggressors, and done some other things. But he was the wing weapons officer, and I come in with my plan. Hey, this is what we want to do, and I'd worked with Vegas and Killer, and it's like game on. And we set up so we were flying large force night missions, lights out over the northern troughs north of Amsterdam against large force. We were able to task and had all these forces coming in, and we were dropping live flares because when a flare goes off at night, it's different than when you see it in the daytime. And so to get all of those things going on, and then what we did, we got a waiver, so we were able to fly with our formation lights at level 2 and our position lights on. So you had a red and green light, and you had formation lights at very low level. And of course, learning how to do those deconflictions within the four ships. And I mean, we're out there with 8 or 16, multiple four ships doing that. So again, well before we got in theater, we were already working on that. And like I said, we had long briefs with each four ship who had been working together. So when we got in theater, we did a few of the training missions, and we did a couple of actually large force exercises where we basically did the mission sideways. They didn't pick up on it, but we ran the mission sideways, and we're getting some of the coordination out of the way. I mean, we didn't have 27 tankers lined up. We had 7 tankers or whatever, but getting those skills together. And then when it came day prior, it's like intel, threat brief, etc. And any questions? Because I mean, we've been flying this for 4 months. We're ready, 3 or 4 months. We're ready to do this. So that was how our training went prior to going. And like I said, the names were adjusted mildly up and down as far as the numbers. But everybody had Christmas on the 17th of December, and amazingly, every kid at the base, Santa Claus showed up, and on the 17th, because we were deploying on the 20th, and at least for everybody who was deploying. And they said, "Hey, even Santa knows Dad's got to go."
Opie, let me ask you a bit about LFE, the large force employment. Then, so LFE, as I understand it, is a phase that happens at the end of Red Flag. It's something that you do as in your graduation exercise going through the weapons school. So I don't want to be rude or anything, but I kind of think about Eagles and their role in large force exercise, and you're no doubt going to put me in my place properly here. But I think you're out in front of everybody else. I know that's not necessarily how it turned out on day one, on night one rather, but you're out in front of everybody else. Is it as simple for you guys as just saying, well, if we're leading the package, anything in front of us is hostile? And as a sort of part two to that question, how competent then were you as an air force and as a coalition in large force exercises, or employment rather, at that point in January 1991?
Well, in Europe, because we were USAF, we did Coronet Sentry. There were all kinds of large LF. Basically, every time you took off, you more or less, like we would take. There was a time Jeff Cliver, Sea Liver, led a 24 ship out of Bitburg, and it was like we took off both directions. We used the taxiways. We did it like we were doing war, and that was the difference. In TAC, you couldn't do that. It'd be, oh my God, we don't have a cable on the taxiway. We were doing it like, we had highway landing strips. We're going to land on the highway. You're going to hit a U-turn down here. The Belgian's going to slap 2 AIM-9s on, and you're back airborne. And so, we practiced that. We would do it one at a time or doing our thing. But when you're out over Germany in the low fly, even if you come in with a 16 ship, there still might be friendlies because of where all the bases are. So when we did the large force employment, and even, the ultimate would be a BVR, we call a BVR sweep, whereas we know we're the first ones in, but Eagles are always late to the merge. So that's what it's a joke. We missed the push time, so there were friendlies out in front of us. Because we don't do that time to target.
That was the weather.
Just, hey, I'm going to push about 22. Hey, fight's on. Let's go. So working real hard to do that. So the BVR sweep would be the perfect opportunity. But so many times we didn't have that luxury. I mean, even in training, there might be friendlies out there somewhere, and we always had to assume that. So they were going, you're not BVR. I mean, it was very rare to, even when we just trained in 2v2s or whatever, we always forced ourselves to do the EID the matrix, and especially because, USAF, there was a matrix because you had so many people who weren't on the same, we're not on the same frequency. They may be coming back from a strike, with World War III, they're coming out of the Fulda Gap, and you got guys launching over here, and these guys are coming back. So we trained for these little 20 by 40 mile areas. Like, they're going to put you there, and but you could have people doing low fly, low routes, tee up. There's a transient level, there's a transient corridor, there's a transient route. So if he's calm out and he's coming back from a strike and he knows I've got to fly this point to this point to this point, well, we had that mapped out, but you couldn't see it on your radar. You had to have a rough idea. So you're still looking for mode fours. You're still looking for the mode 1, 2, 4 sequence. You're still hoping GCI can identify them as well. NCTR, EWWS, any method that you had to declare them hostile. First off, make sure it's not a friendly, and then if you can, declare them hostile, and then before you would shoot. And if you had to VID. And I mean, that was one thing. One of the standards that we were always upheld to was, I'd rather die than to shoot a friendly. Is you'd rather take one in the lips because if you're not sure, you didn't just uncork on somebody. And even in red flag or in training, if you kill a friendly, I mean, in a large force like that, if you killed a friendly, it cost you a keg, even though it's just training. You came back because the penalty had the, not that that's gonna, but it's like you killed a friendly. I mean, unacceptable. Period. Dot. So.
Tell me then a little bit more about the whole night. The Eagle 4 ship. That's the famous formation that you guys would employ with doing that at night. You just talked about the lights and the formation lights down low. So I guess as part of that question as well, were you dividing 4 ships up into night and day? Were you always going to fly at night, always going to fly at day? And how easy or difficult was it to do at night?
We took at Bitburg, what Migs didn't want us swapping back and forth. So what we did is we had day flyers and we had night flyers. The day flyers took off at like 3 a.m. and flew till about 5 or 6 p.m. I mean, they were staged. And the night flyers, I remember, and we swapped it about halfway through, 2 or 3 weeks in. Then we just rotated and said, okay, you guys are flying nights now, because day guys are getting all the MIGs, night guys are getting all the hours. So okay. So now we want, it's like, well, he's got 50 sorties and only 100 hours, but he's got 300 hours, So pilots are going to argue. We all want to get the most, get the best, whatever we can do. So when we swapped it, then you tried the hardest day was that transition period, because you're sleeping in a tent in the desert. There's no darkness, all day, tractors, cars, people playing volleyball outside. I mean, you got the in and out of the tent. So because we were paired 4 ships and we were in the same tent together, so we're all on the same schedule. So your tent's quiet, but everything's going on around you. But that was the hardest. I think that was the hardest one for me. And my wife's like, how did you ever stay awake? You can't stay awake driving down the highway. I said, well, let me tell you about the hardest one. Because we'd come off of a day mission, tried to go to bed, couldn't sleep all night or all day, and then take off at like 6 p.m. and get out there. And about midnight, I mean, I'm just doing the head bob, and I see a SAM goes by, and I'm watching some firefight. I mean, we're capping over back. This is when we're doing 100-mile cap legs. And it's all, I mean, just come on, man, I got it. And then something would shoot, and you'd be awake for a few minutes, and then this kind of fading back. And now our autopilot doesn't maintain heading. We maintain altitude and attitude. So you get at your level, and you can throw the autopilot on, but it's still, the heading will wander. So you can't leave. The whole purpose was so that you didn't go to sleep. Now the airlines, it's different. Not that it ever happens. Northwest. Autopilot's on. See you tomorrow. Don't let me wake up and catch you sleeping. I was briefed that one time. So there were different techniques. And again, I'm relating this back to like Clouseau. We had the wall of eagles, and I mean, that's the weapons school standard was wall of eagles, and we came up because that's putting all that firepower and employment capability. And if you're fighting the large force, that's what you need. Now we're fighting onesie twosies up there, and they're not there. So different people flew it, and to fly line abreast. Now, we were flying low light. When we went out, I mean, we were lights off at takeoff. When we took, in fact, we got debriefed. I hate to slam General Hornberg, but what are you guys doing? So we're taking off with our lights off. There could be guys with SA-8s or, sitting down at the end of the runway. And we would also, this is Bitburg. We show up, of course, we're in combat greens, combat patches, no patches on the side, no scarves, no hats. It's like, hey, we're here for the war. And when we land, Colonel Johnson, the guy who got shot down, the F-15E, so it's the 4th Tech Fighter Wing Provisional. And they come out and meet Colonel Bigham. And of course, we had left our stuff at Bitburg. It's like, we're going to war. We don't need that stuff. And he digs around, finds his head, he puts his hat on, and they're like, y'all need to get your patches and get your hats. So like they FedEx, 2 days later, now we've all got patches, we're wearing scarves, we got our little blue caps. It just, it's like, it was a whole different mentality. And again, that's TAC versus USAF. We came down, when wartime, combat wallet, no credit card. I got a little bit of gold and a couple dollars. So anyway, it just a slightly different mentality. But so when we, that's what, for the weapons officers, we're all saying, hey, these are the threats. We have local threats. I mean, I went to school in the Middle East. Threat could show up anywhere. They shoot you on the street. So we would do check turns. We were flying lights out. We were, combat arrivals. We would always come in high and come down. We're not just, don't be predictable. That's the whole thing. Don't be predictable. And that bit the entire system in the butt down the road. We'll talk about that later. SAM corridors, things like that. But anyway.
Tell me then a little bit about what you were expecting to happen. So your area of responsibility, you talked about corridors. You said that at Al-Kaj you were in the central corridor. You've got the 1st Fighter Wing all the way to the west, isn't it? At Duran?
East. Yeah.
Oh, they're east, are they? Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So what's the disposition of the Eagle units then? How are you coordinating with them? What are you expecting to happen on night one?
So when we got there, we put 4 jets on alert. And we were at Al-Kaj, which was the Saudi AWACS base. So they had this huge, embankments set up for protection of the airplane. And they said, all right, you guys can have it. So we were separate from the flight line with all the F-15Es. At that base, we wound up, we had 2 F-15E squadrons, 2 F-16 squadrons, Syracuse and McIntyre from South Carolina, and then the Eagles. And so we're obviously not training. We're trying to get the frag down as quick as possible. We put 4 ship on alert. We kept them on. I mean, it's what we did at Bitburg. So 5-minute alert, we're all used to it. Set it up. They get, here's the mission. Here's how you're going to do it. There's the van. Run them out there. We've got the police. The SPs are from St. Louis, the guard unit, and they're trying to check our line badge and look at the EL and this. And we're like, we're on alert. I got 5 minutes to be airborne, so we're running through there. They're chasing us down. And so we have to come up with a process. Okay, so when you check in, you go out and you show them your badge, get all the paperwork done, and then we go sit in a tent and wait till we got scrambled. We get scrambled, we go flying out. We expected to go, I mean, it's like this thing could kick off at any minute, but like I said, we had an initial air order of battle. We knew that the big scheme of things. So once we got there, our most important thing was to go talk to the Eagle units. And that's when we were a couple days into it. Biggs went up to see Deptula and the guys at Riyadh, and Vegas and I went along. But anyway, we got briefed the day one, the mission, and we were able to see the frag, although we didn't have a copy of it. And again, this is when nothing's moving via computer. We have computers, but they're connected to printers. That's it. You could type something up and you could print it. So we got to see the frag, and then there was 1 frag available on base. And at that point, when we got there, there's 3 squadrons there. So it's like, you could check it out. I mean, you could come over and review it. So we're trying to break down our missions. And within that frag, it had all the different taskings, Bitburg, 4 ship. Here's target, OCA, DCA, have a cap, etc. So we got all those missions scheduled on paper, and we matched the 4 ships who was going to do that mission. And then you got them a copy of their little piece so that they could start mission planning, threats, intel, where you needed to be, what was going on. And then later on, going back, trying to match that with, here's your tanker track, here's your frequencies, here's your, all of the, the complexities of, but it's what we do at Red Flag. The frag comes out, you break it down. These are all the things you need to know, building your package, if you will. So as soon as we got that going, Biggs launched us. That's what we sent a couple to Langley. And me and Jethro Miller went to Eglin at the book, and we just sat down with their mission planning cell. Clouseau, JB, basically was six weapons officers, and they showed us, kind of gave us the laydown of, this is what they're looking at, and this is how they're understanding the plan and the deconfliction. And it really came out pretty straightforward up front. Was OCA strikes didn't have any lines, but for DCA, for the defensive counter air, we had three corridors. You had an east corridor, and Langley fully expected, this is Syntaf, if you will, fully expected all the action to be happening over at Dhahran, over Kuwait, and in between there and Baghdad. And then you had the west with H2 and, Eglin flying out to Tabuk to cover the western bases. And then they didn't expect anything to be happening in the central quarter. That's why they put Bitburg there. Because we're the guests. We're the bastard children. I'm saying that's tongue in cheek, but that's kind of how we felt, throughout. It's like, well, put them there because there won't be anything going, and if you're taking care of your troops, you're going to give your guys, you're going to put them where you think the best meaty areas are. But anyway, so that was how we got set up. And then after that, we started flying training missions where we were putting caps out there. We would fly missions. Now, I know for Clouseau, it was a big deal. They were talking about, flying because you were flying live. But in USAF, we flew live all the time. You just had your master arm safety wired shut. So, you came off on a Zulu scramble. If it was a Tango scramble, you could go out, you could do intercepts. You just didn't squeeze. You didn't squeeze the trigger. You didn't shoot missiles. Simulate them. So for us, it was no big. We were all loaded live, and we would get out there. We were doing 2v2s, 4v4s, find some DACT, and like I said, we were meeting people, and they call. I think it was the Eagle Valley or Eagle Traw. That's what we were calling it. But it was an area just south of Iraq, right along the border, and we were doing east-west missions. And every time we turned north, though, we were looking for something. And every now and then they launch somebody down there, and we'd knock it off, and we'd drive across. And I'm not saying I crossed the border, but AWACS was always calling, you're approaching the border. You're approaching the border. I can't hear you. You're negative. Don't understand. What'd you say? Say it again. And we were north of the border a few times, chasing them up there. But there's not a line. There wasn't as much. You didn't have. Now when you watch Blue Force Tracker and everything like that, it's still delayed. It's not necessarily exactly right. But I went back 10 years later, and the general is sitting in the KOC, and he's trying to call them out on a very poor ACMI, if you will, where they're just tracking the radar targets. And he's like, tell those guys to turn around and do this and do that. And it's like, hey, you need to just chill out. You're not, no offense, but it's like, they've got a mission and they're doing it. You can't do hands-on, if you do that, it's like Johnson running Vietnam again. Just let them do. You don't know what they see, what their mission is. They're talking. They have a tasking with what they're doing, and so I think it got much harder for everybody, because that was when Jive Kirby, an aside for the 58th, when Jive Kirby was chasing a MiG-25, the whole issue was, well, which side of the border are the parts going to land? He knew it was a MiG-25. The guy's draining chaff. He's right, he's a few miles behind him, trying to get up to him so that he can take a shot. And they're like, clear to fire, understand, clear to fire, and it's like negative. Somebody's out there with a slide rule trying to figure out, well, if he, he's doing 300, and if he gets hit here, what's the missile fly time? Well, by the time they figure it out, he crosses the border, so they don't shoot him down. Now, this is in 93, wow. 94, somewhere in there. But, just ridiculous stuff like that. Whereas with current administration, I think about, hey, man, if they come down and threaten you, shoot them. I like it. So that's what we expected.
Okay.
So now, given that, we had, so as now we finally get a copy of the frag. They, as things got better through time. So now every squadron has so we have one copy of the frag, and we had a mission planning cell, which was kind of the weapons officers and the guys putting it together. Luckily, we had some really smart kids on computers. They start building cards. They have stuff built, and that's what we were talking about. So the guys flying days would do the mission planning for the people at night, and the guys flying nights, because not everybody flew every day. So whatever if you were on days but you weren't flying that day, you were the mission planning cell. So you got the frag, you broke it out, you built everybody's cards, and basically gave them the baseline of all the radio freaks, all the words of the day, the plans. Here's where other packages are going. Here's the OCA strikes that are going to happen, and then here's where you fit into the big picture. And then as the flight lead, like I remember, I would send my 4-ship, let them go eat, go gym, whatever. I'll brief you at the tent. And so I would go take the mission planning package, and then I would call and talk to the flight lead of the strikers or whatever, and we would put and this is where red flag really came in. It's red flag, southern push, northern push, eastern push, whatever, things that we had practiced 100 times, and we, in just a few words, it's you'd say that it's just like the play of the day is, and we knew what we were going to do. But and then the only issue was, do you want us out front? Are we going to have the weasels out front, the eagles, and then the rest of the strike package? Or are you going to put the eagles out front, the weasels behind us, launching missiles over our head? So whatever. That's where a lot of that coordination. So it just didn't take as long. And for the initial frag for the plan, they had day 1, day 2, and then the last, and I mean 1,000 pages. And then they had you've heard this before, the last page said repeat day 2. I mean, that's how far this had gone. I mean, it was so in depth for the first 2 days, and then day 3 was repeat day 2. And that was kind of how, so then it became very fast flow, of how they wanted to do it. But the guys in the KOC were getting more experience. And as they started pushing things out, the same questions would come up. The tankers got very comfortable with all the different tanker routes. The only thing, Intel making their inputs, we had constant source, all the different, satellite imagery. This was a big deal if you want to talk about it right now, but Intel and satellite imagery and photos, target photos and stuff.
Yeah, tell me.
And there's a lot of capabilities out there. But one of the hardest things, and again, I'm not a striker. For the strikers, just give me one target photo. I mean, I got it. I've got the coordinates and all of that. But I mean, these are built. I've never been over this city before. I've never seen it. It's not like it's out in the middle of anywhere, whatever it was. And, guys trying to build their DEMPs or their points of impact and all of their targeting. And this was something that General Horner really worked on. They made him the Spacecom commander, when he came back. And he was very adamant about getting fighter guys and operators involved with the intel side, because they've got all of this intel and all of this satellite imagery and all of these comms and all the things that we are so good at collecting, but we're terrible at getting it to the people who need it. Sorry, that's above your, you can't see that. It's classified. Well, the reason you got it is so that I can hit the target. So being able to get that data out. And I remember Francisco, I don't even remember his real name, but he was an 06. He's working for Horner, and he comes to Nellis, and we have these briefings, and all the strikers. Of course, now we got F-15Es, Floyd and Natardis, and all the rest of the guys. And it's what type of imagery do you really need? Now, again, now we're in the digital age. You can get it at any angle, any quadrant. I mean, I could go online and get way better stuff than we were getting then. But by the time they got a printed out picture to them, they were having to plan 2 weeks prior what they thought they were going to hit. And of course, if they hit it and strike the second day, it's gone. So now you still don't have target imagery of what they were trying to get to. So that was one of the big things, that we have all this intel and being able to break the code of getting it to the people that needed it. And this goes back to, we had trained the Iraqis. The Iraqis are driving around with Hawk radars on the flatbed trucks, turning them on, drive it over here, turn it on, drive it over here, turn it on. Well, when they pick up all those signals, they're going, okay, there's SAMs all along here. So we're going, so on day 1, there were 3 SAM sites on the border. By day 5, they have 1,000 missiles on the board. You're not allowed to, and they kept trying to, risk. They became very risk averse after the first couple of days went great. Then it's like, well, we don't want anybody flying through any SAM sites, but the taskings kept putting us across the same point, because you're deconflicting all these guys. We had the same entry exit points, and I wasn't in Vietnam, but I'm going Route Pack 6. Does that sound familiar? We're going to fly down the same daggum ridge every day. You think they're going to figure that out? They know where we're coming from. They know what altitudes we're at. So just mix it up. So that was when the B-52s would come in, and they were killer, dropping their bombs and everything. But they would cruise climb into the cons. I could see them from south of Riyadh. Yep, B-52s are en route back. There they go. And I mean, those guys, they kept, and the Iraqis were keeping their SA-6s. They wouldn't turn a radar on because they knew they'd get schwacked. But they could track them and they could launch visually and then turn them in. That's just like, that's how we're going to lose somebody. So it was just little stupid stuff like that. There was definitely some complacency because there was so much going on that was so well thought out the first couple of days. I always said, we had 6 months to get day 1 and day 2. And from there on, we had about 3 hours to get the whole package together. Yeah. So it was wonderful to see it all work. I mean, I was almost out of gas one time. We got tasked, somebody didn't show up, and they launched in there, and I go, okay, we're going to need some fuel. So of course, Dragnet, they have a fuel guy. He's running around. So he finds us a tanker. We run down there and get on it, and the tanker's cruise climbing to 30,000. But I mean, he's hustling to get to us because we're fixing to flame out. We get the fuel. He gives us basically every drop he has, turns around and does an idle descent into Riyadh. And as soon as we come off the tanker, we're like, all right, back on station. They go, oh, you can go. And you're like, you just risk, putting these, 6, 7 guys in the dirt out here. So, I mean, it was just little things that, the fog of war. But, for the most part, like I said, 99% of it just worked awesome. And even on my when Coleman and I were coming south, and we'll get to that later, but we had a tanker driving north. He's listening to the radio and he goes, those guys are going to need some gas. And I wish I could remember his name right now. We were able to share. He shows up at Nellis, brings me a Jensen, a Jack Downs. He goes, man, here's for the great job. The next day I take it right back to him and give it to him. He's down at Red Flag. And I'm like, you guys are the ones who, were thinking outside the box and showed up. I mean, it's just wonderful. Great. It's an attitude, just great attitude, making stuff happen. So
your kill was no, don't apologize. I hope you don't. No. So your kill was on the 27th. So that's 10 days after the war kicks off. Then. So what are those 10 days like for you then? I mean, you've just shared a particular recollection about running short on gas. What other observations do you have? What were you learning in that period of time?
Well, we had all the storms, so. I was, we had guys launching at 3 o'clock as well. So I'll take you on an aside. Here's the hardcore parts of war. They're launching Scuds, and we go alarm. That night, I think like at midnight, we go alarm red, which means missiles are inbound. Now we train for this all the time, but it's always in an inspection, and you have to get your mask on and your suit and all of this stuff. So when the alarms go off, alarm red. Of course, we know we're striking that night. We know. And I mean, we can hear all the jet, everybody's cranked and, the guys, I mean, the air of excitement and, man, I couldn't sleep, but I had an FM radio and I'm listening the way AFN, Armed Forces Network, we get a little bit of ABC, a little bit of CBS, a little bit of whoever. So you're getting all the news. They go, well, I see some airplanes that are taxiing around here. There's reporters outside of every base. And it looks like some of the airplanes look like they're about to take, like, shut up. That's when you needed a 44. So anyway, the initial missions go, and we were fragged to be on cap on we had the different missions, like I said. So we didn't constrain people to OCA or DCA, and that's what back to Clouseau, I think the 33rd did. They had some guys that only did strike missions, and they had some that only did cap. So they kept the mission the same, which helps, if you're briefing, you're doing the same thing every day. But what we did was whatever the missions were, you got to do stuff different, which kept you in the game a lot better too. I think you were more aware of the other things that were going on. So anyway, the first day we were doing a high value asset cap, central quarter, just inside. We were basically sitting over top of Talil, or just south of Talil. Talil had not been bombed away yet, and so we're south of that. So hitting the tankers, coordinating, being out on cap, and with all of the weather that was going on, our AAI, our identifications, you can see you're getting radar contacts, you're getting spoofs, you're getting all kinds, people, AWACS is calling contacts because these were thick storms. So we're like, what happened to being out here in the desert? We're supposed to be clearing a million, like everything we had flown up to that point had been just clear, could see everything. So that was one of the issues. What we also saw was as the strikes were going in, as if you were in that mission, you told the mission planning cell, let me know, write down all the strike packages, call signs, and what their target is, so we could put on our map. As we pulled out our map, I would draw in, okay, just an arrow. There's a package coming across here. There's a package coming across here, whatever, because we knew when they were coming out that we were going to, for 5 minutes, you're seeing all these friendlies come out, and we're trying to track that so that once they're out, again, back to, we're not BVR, but at least we know shouldn't be any more friendlies in front of us. So little things like that. That was the big thing. The tanker coordination, the AWACS coordination. While we were training, we had all the expats that run the tower and the controllers and all that. And I mean, it was very scripted how you could get up and do it. And man, from 3 o'clock that morning on, you took off. You didn't talk to anybody till you got to AWACS and the tanker. I mean, you went wherever you could go, wherever you wanted. We had different altitudes and stuff. And that was the thing, the altitudes of where strikers, F4s, A10s, the 117s, even though we couldn't see them, we could see them in the moonlight. So knowing what altitudes they were at, a rough corridor, and number one, I don't want to be there. And number two, when I saw these wobbly goblins going by, it's like, okay, the boys are headed back, getting out of our way. And because they may forget to turn their mode 4s back on. That was because they basically went totally calm out as they were northbound. But when they'd come back, they were supposed to turn stuff back on. But heat of war, they might forget. So that helped knowing that as well. And then my next mission. So that was the first day. The missions on the second day was an OCA strike where we had we had Buccaneers, and we had Tornadoes, and we had F-16s, and setting up that strike and how we were getting in. And like I said, we still had weather at that point, so now they're all having to transition to mid-level bombing. And then the next day we're on cap out there, and the weather clears, and it's like you could see a runway, and then you'd see 3,700 perfect bombs that were dropped 100 yards to the left of the runway. So, all the F-16s were, the wind correction and everything, they're dropping from 24,000 versus, 500 feet. So little things like that. So, I mean, so seeing the different strikes and the ins and outs. And again, we would wind up sometimes on that border with Langley. If Langley committed to something, how we were doing handoffs and how AWACS was handling, because we each had our own AWACS basically in our corridor. And so those guys, and then they had one behind them that was sort of coordinating everything. And then they got better. They're like, we could probably do this with 2 AWACS so they can coordinate the lines. They see everything, all the traffic that's going back and forth. And then, running up every now and then we'd see some Eagles. It's like, all right, got you, 10 miles apart, able to pick guys out. And then the other thing was the AAA was they had S-60s and S-100, you get 100 millimeter cooking off. We're down there, we're running around at 20,000 feet, and all of a sudden stuff's blowing up above you. And it's like, okay, there's a reason we're up here at 30,000 feet when, in those areas. So that's where intel was very effective, because it's like, there was this one, and we called him Big Ben because it's like he cooked off 6 or 7 rounds every hour in 100 millimeter. And we just marked it, and you'd be flying out there, and sure enough, you'd boom, boom, boom. All right, he got paid for the day. But we found him one night with the tanker. So the tankers were getting ballsy, and they were like, hey, you guys, these are the guard guys, and they want to be in it. They're like, hey man, we'll drag you guys to Baghdad. Okay, that's great. So we're out there, and we all do. Again, it's all lights out, and we're all in the tanker. And of course, he's got his lights are like on level 1, and we're all in. And I know there's 8 F-111s over here, and I've got 8 F-15s, and there's F-16s behind us, and of course, stack of 7 tankers, and this KC-10 is leading, and he's out front. And so as we're driving it, and all of a sudden, I look down at my INS and I go, we're almost over Big Bend. And about that minute, boom, boom, 3 rounds go off, out in front of the KC-10. He's like, in the turn, in the turn, in the turn. And so they turn the whole, everybody's around it. Of course, we all bail out because it's like, this is over. He didn't want to get shot. All right, this is over. And I mean, F-111, everybody's lights come on, because that's the first thing. Turn your lights on so you don't run into somebody. Because, obviously we're not worried about somebody seeing, being lights out for the strike would be appropriate. But all the lights come on, and I mean, it's just a bomb burst. 50 airplanes are, going every which direction. But, okay, perhaps the tankers should stay south of the border from here on. That's great.
What were you getting, OP, from the other Eagle units then around the Iraqi Air Force? They came out the gate with a bit of fighting spirit, and that was quickly broken. What as you lead up to the sort of 2 or 3 days before you go and get your kills, what are you seeing and what are you expecting from the enemy?
The initial, well, in fact, when I can't remember, it was Cheese, and we're talking. I mean, when Cheese got his kills, I call him. I get back. I'm like, Cheese, you got it, you did it, man. All right, but we're not getting debriefs on them. You know what I mean? So we don't know what their actual engagement was. In fact, I didn't even know what the engagement was till I was actually at McDonnell Douglas, and they go, "Hey, do you want to see the tapes?" And you're like, "Yeah, I want to see the tapes." So they throw it in. We get to watch, some Clouseau's and some of the others, until you eventually ran into it. We're all getting to do Mig Killer debriefs, whatever. But there were MiG-29s. I mean, we could see it. They just weren't flying that much. We're all on station, and if somebody took off, it was a feeding frenzy. I mean, everybody out there, if 2 MiG-29s airborne west of Baghdad, 30 miles, everybody's going that way, and then they'd have to call us off. But there was one time we were actually driving into them, and we'd gone up secure with AWACS, and he said, "Hey, there's some MiG-29s, but we have a strike package coming from the west." And there were F-14s and F-15s and whatnot. And so that's what happened was they would turn around. We would get close and they would turn around. So what we did is we drove in and said, we're basically going to drag you. They turned us south, and these guys lock us up. And as long as they were keeping a spike, they're driving, chasing us. And that was when, like I said, I don't remember it, but it was 33rd Jets went in and schwacked them. And I'm like, great, we're actually getting to be the bogeys out here. We say, you drag them, I'll bag them. So, damn it, wait, let's do the other way. But they were actually OCA for a strike package, and it worked out perfect because these guys the MiG-29s weren't even aware. That's why I think it was Cheese on that one. But anyway, two MiG-29s got, of course, shot one drives in the ground, whatever it was, but kill's a kill.
Yeah. So, just talking about other assets, you talked about space and the protectiveness around that. One of the things that I suppose it's natural with the passage of time, but one of the things I get sitting down with guys like you and talking to them about Desert Storm is some good rivet joint stories.
Mm-hmm.
Were you talking to rivet joint as well as AWACS? Did you have a direct line of communication to them? What were you getting from them? What were they helping you with?
Well, we sat down with them. They came because, again, the communication flow. So when we got in theater, they sent somebody down to come brief us. This is what we can do. We can tell you the name of the pilot. We can tell you what color uniform they're wearing, and we're like, hey, all I want to know is hostile, bandit, MiG-23 is even better. That's it. I don't care what his name is, if he's Russian, what. So we squared that. Then we asked, could you make it a female voice? So if you can you have a female give it to, because so many, we were mostly males, pretty much all males, fine. But that's why our bingo, our fuel low, warning, fuel, it's a female voice, it stands out. So we were asking them, could you make it a female when you give us that clearance? If you have females on board, do that. And they're like, well, sometimes we can. Okay. But I think that was the thing with the clarification of this was one of those cases that like, we have all of this data and we're like, don't need it. I just need, these two pieces are the most important that you can help me with. And they would come in, basically they would come in over the AWACS frequency. So we didn't know if it was AWACS or rivet joint because they wouldn't go, this is rivet joint on guard, blah, blah, blah. That guy's hostile. But you would hear a call that says they would call your call sign and tell you what was in front of you. May or may not. I can't give you a specific example on that, but I know there were several that I know that bandit call either came from rivet joint telling AWACS or rivet joint telling us on the free. Even though, like so many of us, I told you what we were doing with the radar on the older jets. On these, we're still stepping through because you've got a mode 1 and a mode 2 and a mode 3, and we've got an automatic system that goes through and it just checks, are those modes being swapped? It doesn't get the right code. So there was a mode 1 swap every X period of time, and you had to you're looking at your card, okay, making sure I'm on the right mode 1, squawking it, and also interrogating it. So I've interrogated, I know what modes they're squawking, and now I'm interrogating to make sure they're not squawking the correct mode 1. So again, not a friendly, not a friendly, not a friendly. And then if positive, so lack of friendly and positive hostile, what we were looking for. So rivet joint was, like I said, I can't give you more than that as far as specific examples, but I can tell you we had a face-to-face with them before it started. They knew what we needed, and sometimes we got that. The other one, Compass Call, I think.
Yeah.
Compass Call was one we all knew they existed. We never worked with them that much because mostly they're in a close-in battlefield area, CAS and supporting that. But the comm jamming and things, like even in my case, it was in my Mig Kill. I didn't find out until years later. Terry Fennessy, also one of my flight commanders, great guy. He was down at the KOC and he said, yeah, Compass Call heard their IOC talking. Their IOC was telling them that they had Eagles on them and they jammed them. And then the jets all pitched back into Baghdad. I thought it was lieutenants. Doug figured out it was a bunch of captains and majors from the Iraqi Air Force. I thought it was just second lieutenants. They go, hey, Ahmed, take it to Baghdad or I shoot you. So,
but yeah, that was EC-130, wasn't it? I think Compass Call was the platform for it. Okay. Yeah, because they had linguists on board too. Very interesting.
So and it was actually, and then later I was doing a debrief at Tyndall. I mean, a large mission debrief type thing. And this kid came up and he was down there going through GCI training. He said, I was on Compass Call. He said, I heard you and I jammed that frequency. I took that guy out. And I mean, that's the part you go, at the time, I should have written his name down. I mean, I hope if he's out there, man, contact me. I'll put him on my email at opf15hotmail.com. So
that's so cool.
But yeah, I mean, that was the thing. So the tankers, the guys that we didn't get to talk to, that out of these thousands of airplanes, and again, the strikers, and I knew a lot of guys, like I might know a mission lead, or I knew guys that were in the strikes, and years later, we were able to put together that we were actually on the same missions. But there were some missions that there were F-16 mission leads, mission commanders that I knew, and he'd come up with voice recognition on the radio, and he goes, hey, the weather, we can't get below the weather. Can you go down and take a look? I mean, this is not something you would normally ask somebody. And we're out there he came over, we were just on a cap in the middle. And he said, we're like, 100 miles south. Can you go down this area and take a look? And so we just dropped down, take a look. So you're going to be clear below 10,000, give him basically a quick weather check out front. And they're able to come in and do it. Because he said, if we can't get down, this isn't worth even driving up there. So, I mean, the coordination and the working together, it was awesome. I mean, it's sort of red flag. Red flag is so much harder than what we were doing there and being live. So
you just flashed one of your maps, and when we did this at your house a year or so ago, I took some pictures of your map, so I'll put them up on the video so people can see them if you're okay with that, OP. But
yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things I always think about with the Eagle is you don't have, at that point in time, you don't have a moving map. There's no sort of sit display to tell you where you are.
Well, it was on your leg and it moved a lot. You just couldn't keep it in.
But tell me about that then. Seriously, how easy or difficult was it in the airplane to maintain situational awareness of your present position, where you are over the ground and where you are relative to waypoints, people or landmarks or cities, or whatever it is, airfields that people are calling out?
When we go to red flag, everything out there is terrain based. I mean, you have these maps, basically the low fly maps, if you will. And so you have Worthington and Belted and, all these different little mountains and ridge lines. So we all train with that when you're at red flag, and you get used to using the visual references. In Germany, you're like, I'm over a town with a chapel, with a church and red tile roof. And they go, yeah, me too. And there's 400 of them, but, lining up the highways. And we flew over Europe with the low fly maps. And you really did get good. I mean, picking out, because for us, it was the training where we were going to fight. So knowing whether you were, obviously you can pick out Frankfurt, Stuttgart, the big ones, but Aachen or, the different, I'm over B50 or B51 or A12, the different Autobahns and stuff. So the more, I think from our perspective, we were so used to seeing that. And then the other thing was because they made a great decision to, instead of letting all of us pick different bullseye points, the planners, the overall mission planners, there were like 4 or 5 basic bullseye points. And so when you came in with Dragnet, you knew for your task, for your mission, Dragnet was going to be using that point. If that was Pepsi, Salmon Pack East, or Coke, which was, say Alticatum or whatever it was. So when they called out, you knew those points. And then because of the desert, and except for the cloud, that's why the storms hurt us so bad, because now you're like, okay, now we got to go back to just doing, line item. I mean, if flying over the water, you get really good at lat longs and, just picking out your INS coordinates, if you will, your coordinates. And once the weather started to clear, you could see Talil, you could see Al Assad, you could see, we could always see Baghdad, you could see where the fighting was going. There was always stuff airborne over Baghdad. So I think that made a big difference. And the maps, again, because even though we didn't have the digital terrain, we were so used to having that map. And pick out one. We start out, you'd always have the guy that had the map that came across the whole cockpit because it's his first time. He's like, well, I got to know where I'm at. And by the end, I'm flying off of this one, but I could fold it up to, this is half of Iraq. And I've got, okay, there's Cindy and there's Baghdad and there's, Chile and there's Iran, and you got everything you needed, but you had the key points of where you were at. And because we didn't have unlimited, and we always did this in Germany too, you plasticized them. And so, wax pencil or, marker or whatever to get for that mission, and then clean it off and go on to the next day. But our maps kept getting smaller. So by the end, you basically had on your lineup card, you're like, yeah, there's Baghdad. That's all I need to know. So.
Tell us about your kill then, or your kills rather, plural.
Let me take a sip real quick.
Okay. So this is on the 27th, and it's you and Coma Powell.
So we're 10 days in. We've done some strike missions. We've done some, the have caps, etc. And Langley, the one kill wing, one tech fighter, one fighter kill. It was just a little bit of a joke. Eglin's slaying them over here. We're begging to get something, and of course we're with the F-15Es, and the E's are doing, every time they fly Seek Eagle, so they're doing all kinds of strike configurations, and they're engaging all kinds of stuff, blowing stuff up. And of course, as a gray model, light gray, we wouldn't even say the B word. It's like, tui. And in fact, that they wanted a plan because, the F-15C model, we could drop bombs. A models could drop bombs. In fact, a lot of guys when you go through training, if you were going to Langley or Kadena or something, you actually went out and dropped a couple of Mark 82s just to, proof of concept. And our targeting system was actually better than the F-16, more accurate, especially from altitude at that point. Theirs is way better now. But just for raw bombing capability. But because of missions and financing and who's getting what, targeting, et cetera. And so when we were first coming down, I don't remember if it was General Horner, but it was like, hey, I want you guys to have a plan after the first couple of days, once we've destroyed everything, we're going to load bombs on everybody.
Oh.
And Biggs goes, hey, you guys start working that out. And we're like, we were already coming to, the weapons guys got to get checked. None of our guys here have ever put a bomb together. Our guys haven't dropped bombs. But then it was like you said, so here's all the reasons that it's not smart for us to do this, because we're going to be slaying fighters left and right, this and that. By day 3, I go back and talk to Big. I said, hey, that thing about the bombs, you think because we're just airborne out here at 30, we could just do our whole mission, and right at the end, give us 2 targets and we'll go plink, plink, boom, boom, blow some stuff up, and then we're on our way back home. This wouldn't be that hard. And then he brought it back over and, hey, y'all want us to load up some bombs? We're ready. And they're like, nah, we don't need you. So,
wow. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it was one of those kind of off the cuff. And like I said, we fought so hard against it up front, gave them all the right reasons. And, in retrospect, we would love to do it, because seeing stuff blow up.
Okay, so quick diversion before you get back with the kill story. But so what about ground strafing?
Well, our guns candid up for air to air. So we have up 2 degrees. So you're behind somebody, obviously you always have to pull lead, you want to get your nose out. Well, F4 guys, they're pretty smart. They go, hey, could we get the gun candid up a little bit? Because that way, while we're tracking them, we don't have to pull as much lead. And so that's how we train. But we would always go out when we fly low level. One of the things you do, you use a dead eye reticle, and you'd set it at, I can't remember, minus 260 or whatever. There was a setting that basically you could come in and at 8 mils low and at 500 feet. Now again, we're shooting TP, usually target practice, but 20 millimeter. So if we penetrated a Jeep, was pretty impressive. In other words, it wasn't like we were going to be tank killers or anything. But we would go out and we would do a couple of strafe, especially for angling guys over the water. You didn't have to worry about running into something. So do a couple of strafing runs. Well, Cheese strafed to Toyota, and Mongo strafed Candid, and I think Clouseau with him. So they went, when they went in and lit that up, and when they came back and they watched the tapes and went, oh my God, and then it was like, all right, the next day the frag, no F-15Cs are allowed to strafe. Like, damn it. I mean, we're all ready to light them up. But, so strafing in an Eagle is not a good thing.
Okay.
It can be very dangerous to you. Well, especially, I guess, and for those who, I mean, I hope you get Mongo's story sometime, but, Clouseau obviously told part of it. He goes through, they don't talk for like 5, they see this Candid and they're out there capping over, and it's like, hey, I wonder, blah, blah, blah. And they got all these troops out there. Let's just go in and take it out. I mean, we're out here doing nothing. We're contributing to the war effort. So they backed off and they dialed the reticle in and they came in. And he said, right when they got down, as they're approaching and they're opening up on it, all of a sudden everybody there shooting and, crap's going off left and right. He said, I'm doing, 550, 600 knots at 20 feet. And said, I can't even reach to talk to the radio. I'm just trying to not hit something, as it getting out of there before I get shot. And, blast up and come back. And I could just see he's like wiping sweat off both sides of his head. Oh, okay. Maybe that wasn't a good idea. Trying to see it blow up. But anyway, that's a good one. So we've been doing these missions every day. And like I said, Eglin's slaying them. We got nothing going on. So a frag comes out the day prior that says they're going to open up a Langley kill box. 50 miles. So it's south of Baghdad. Basically, the border of this kill box is just south of Baghdad. So it covers Talil and Al-Assad and a couple others. 100 miles wide, 50 miles deep. Langley's going to cover all this. So they're trying to basically, and we call it's the Langley kill box. Langley doesn't have a lot of kills. They're trying to get them more active in the war. They own Centaf. They own 9th Air Force. That's just the way things work. And so we get our tasking, and we are actually going to take off and cap south of the border to protect AWACS against no known visible threat. We're 10 days into it. They're not flying a whole lot, if at all. And so we brief the mission, and we're taking off at 7 or whatever it is, and get out. And my 4 ship was myself, Geraldo De Leo, Gito, Jiffy Jeff Brown, and Coma Powell. Great 4-ship guys. If you're watching, kudos to you. So we brief our mission, we grab a quick breakfast, we had, go through our ritual and climbing in the jets. So first one out, Geraldo, his INS craps out or his radar doesn't work. So he turns out it's like, hey, go get on back, go get it fixed. And then Jiffy craps out. And then one of them had a radar problem, one had an INS problem. Now we launched every jet that we put out there launched eventually. They went back and got fixed and they eventually launched. So I grab Coma and I go, 4, you're with me. So we go out because we're doing a cap. So we have to be on station. But based on what we were doing, as I've told them many times, I go, now we're used to being out there for 6 hours doing nothing but hot, cold, hot left, cold, cold, hammered up. And we were doing 75-mile cap legs because there's just nothing. We're just droning. And then sometimes because of the lack of tankers or limited tankers, they would go, hey, you guys are going to cover, there's a 2.5-hour period, there's no tanker. So we're flying at 250, 300 knots on the blades because, we'll push it up. If there's something out there, we're going to get fast, but we're basically just conserving fuel to stay on station unless they need us. So we're in place. So given that, I said, we could have just sat on the ramp and called hot north, cold south. Nobody would have known the difference. The Iraqis wouldn't have cared. We'd have saved gas and we could have jumped out and had, gone to eat in the middle of it. Hey, you can take my radios, just do this. It was a joke, obviously. So we get out there and we check in with AWACS. We go to the tanker and, we go to hit the tanker on the way up. So it's about 45 minutes to the border. As we check in with Bulldog, they go, blah, 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 press up to, I can't remember the name of the cap, but at the time, it's in the middle of the Langley kill box. And I'm like, authenticate. Because, I don't want to get in trouble for violating the Langley kill box. And at that time, there was a 6-ship. In fact, Biff Mott and some others, there was a 6-ship of Langley jets, and they were all leaving to go to the tanker. And so I guess that was what was happening. So all the Langley jets left at the same time to go to the tanker. So they shoved us up there. So, all right, we're in it. So now all of a sudden, man, this just got a lot more interesting. So we're capping it. I'm lined up on Baghdad, and we're about 30 miles south, between 30 and 70 miles. I'm doing a 40-mile leg. And within an hour or so, we get snapped, bogeys, east, blah, blah, blah. And it was either coming out of Jalaba or Talil. And they had kind of gone southeast and they were coming north. And we roll in and we kind of chase them for a while. And we're about 40 miles behind them. But there's a SA-3 site. Al Assad, there was an SA-3. SA-3's maybe 25, 30,000 feet, whatever. And again, we don't have a moving map. And I can see the airfield. But I'm calling AWAC. I said, just tell me when we clear the mez. And we start ramping down. So anyway, we get out there. And these guys, they just keep going north. So these could have been, something engaged to the north or whatever, but we're so far back and the AWACS calls us off. And they're, again, this is the coordinate because of no coordination between us and the guys at Indralink. So we're well north of Baghdad. Okay, we spin it back. So we go back and we cap over Al Assad. So because I know where the airfield's at, so I use that as my point, I use that as my mark and I just capped looking straight at Baghdad again still. And then finally, Jiffy and Geraldo are coming out, and they get their jets fixed, and they come out. So they show up on station, and I go, Coma and I bail out to go get fuel. We tell them, hey, we saw a couple, nothing else going on. So they're out there. So we run down to the tanker. Jiff's on station, and this is about a 45-minute trade out. By the time we go south, and we do some split S's and do something to stay awake, and get on the tanker, get our gas, and then turn around and come back. So that's when you fix your lunch. You get your peanut butter crackers on your leg, and so you're not in the middle of turning. So we come back in, and as we come back in, Jiffy, because that was what the excitement was, just going to the tanker. Not saying that's exciting, saying there just was nothing else going on. So we're showing up, and they're out. So we do the high five, and as soon as Coma and I come back in, snap east, bogeys, blah, 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 bullseye, Pepsi 130, 80 miles. And I'm like, here we go again. So since we'd already been over there, now we're much more familiar with what I'm looking for over in that area, because we're basically pushing over towards Kuwait. So we start driving east, and we're hammering down, and, we see every now and then see a hit, but they are basically right in the beam to us at 80, 90 miles. very, you know, they're holding the beam. So AWACS is giving us the call outs, and we're hammered down. No mode fours, no friendly. We've gone through the ID matrix. We go over Al Assad, and now starting to get some hits. And I'm using EWWS. I can see them with EWWS, and I'm like, okay. So I, you know, it was like, hey, let's. Obviously, they're going to. I'm just thinking they're going to Baghdad. So we took a cutoff vector and we start driving north. And as we come out there, and now I'm locking, and Coma is locked, and their altitude, they're at about 5,000 feet. They're doing about 350, nothing fast, but they come across there. When we lock them up, they turn out towards Iran. I mean, they turn northeast. So break lock, and now we go back sweeping because there had been a ETAT report that the Navy had put out, and it was one of their tactics. They're going to try to, you know, this is, like I said, how the Gomers train and watch what they do, that they were going to try to do a big pincer and drag everybody out to get you chasing them down. And then these guys are going to sweep you. And so, I mean, that's in the back of my mind because they've got, you know, 7 airfields down here. And even though we've been hammering them, who's to say they're not going to fly? So these guys come out and they turn tail on. So as soon as they turn tail to us, I'm so like, look low. Something's coming out of here. There's going to be something around us. So we go back to our search areas. I search, you know, I'm looking 22 and below, and he's looking 20 and up. So Coma's searching high, I'm searching low, and keep checking with AWACS. Of course, you know, if they can see it, that's great. But you know, with bad poop is worse than no poop. But they had pretty good. Let's just say they had pretty good vision at that point. Their altitudes were terrible. They couldn't always, you know, their altitude were plus or minus 20,000 feet, but at least they get you looking in the right direction. So we're back to that. Well, but we're still seeing these contacts, and we're about 20 miles in trail with them. And all of a sudden, if the picture breaks, they start to pitch back. So again, now we see a little bit of a lead trail that they're actually pitching back. And then after a couple of hits, AWACS comes back and said they're headed northwest. And so again, now I'm concerned because we're right over the top of Al Assad. I said, tell me when we cleared Al Assad, you know, just so I really want to start ramping down because they're so much lower. And it's clearing 1 million. And I mean, it's 10:55 in the morning, 10:45. Sun's high to the south. I've got Coma. He's at 32,000. You know, he's up to my left side. I'm at 30, and we're about two and a half miles apart. So it's like, all right, we're not going to let these guys get away from us. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. So as we start chasing down, now we're ramping down. We're supersonic, probably about 1.1. I'm not one of those. I'm not going to go 1.6 and waste everything out there. It's like, but we want to be just over, especially for employment, long range, distant. You know, missiles are already supersonic. They can take care of the rest of it. So again, they're only doing about 350, and they're still at 5,000. But now, as they pitch back in, they've descended to about 500. I mean, they're definitely low, and we're closing in. So we're closing from 20. We're into about 10 miles, and with the AIM-7 WES, the weapons engagement zone, and we're fast and high. That gives the AIM-7 a long range shot. But a tail shot with AIM-7 is never something to really trust. Let's just say it's very in training, it's very forgiving. In reality, the missile ain't going to get there. And so Coma says, we have different ranges: R2, R turn and run. You know, R1 means the missile might get there and tap on him. R2 means it might get there and dent his airplane. And R turn and run, it ought to smack him and kill him. And so I'm a little bit out in front of Coma. He's hanging. I mean, he's doing a great job hanging on. He's out there again. He only has about 150 hours, and the 50 of it is just out there drilling holes in Iraq. So as we start ramping down, we can see it, and I'm locked to him, and I'm about 6 miles in trail, and I'm trying to get to R turn and run because if I shoot an AIM-7, I want this guy to go out. So as continue ramping down, I'm through about 16,000. And I hit RTR. We've already gone through the ID matrix. Now, the difference is they've been declared bandits. They're not friendlies. They're positive hostile. And AWACS is talking, and I can hear AWACS talking, but they can't hear us because our radios are set, the antennas are set for mostly forward. So that was one of the LIMFACs we figured out, that when we're talking, you know, they're 150 miles south of me, they could not hear what we were saying. But we're here, and we're replying to them. Everybody else can hear us. that's out there. And of course, when we got on this vector, everybody was in. I mean, all the Langley guys are. Everybody's there. It's like, hey, I got it. And they go, no, OPEC, OPEC, you got it. And then everybody came up in they're like, go get them. I mean, we're all team players at that point. And Jiffy Jeff, because they were headed to the tanker, he's like, hey, do you guys need any help? And I go, nah, we're good. I mean, I'm thinking there's two of them. Coleman, I got it. Just go get gas. Who knows what else is coming? So we continued descending, take my shot, and I mean, aim 7, it pulls lead, it goes out, and it is a 90-degree vertical. This guy's down at about 100 feet. Now, again, I've got the TD container. The TD square is a target designator. I can see where he should be, but all I can see of him is the shadow because they're desert tan. And for some reason in my mind, we were still looking for green. I was still looking for green, for green floggers. I don't know. That was one of those things. Maybe Intel said it, maybe they didn't. We never saw a picture, but again, that was bad on my part. But it was like, I can't see the jet, but I can see his shadow. So I'm watching the shadow, and then the missile, I can see my missile fly out because I think the shot was at 5.5 or something. It was just inside 6 miles. But I mean, 90-degree impact, big explosion. And then I'm watching, and the TD, my radar's still locked, and he's flying out of it. He's in a gentle left-hand turn. And I'm like, now we have A kill and K kill. So an A kill is, K kill, it's dead. A kill is percentage of, who knows, that maybe all the parts are flying together in the same direction, fixing to kill apart. Maybe you have sliced a hydraulic line. It's going to take him, it could be 5 minutes before that airplane blows up. But in this case, our closure, we've got 300 knots of closure. So we're, I've gone from 6 miles to 3 miles. Coma at this point is still, he's still up about 16,000 coming down, and he had taken a shot. So I see his missile flying out. And what we basically had an echelon where they had turned to the northeast. They make this left-hand turn back towards Baghdad. So when they did, who knows who's leading, but there's 2 jets that are out front, 2 jets that are back behind, but for us, it's an azimuth sort. So we're going to sort it side side, and the azimuth is closer to me, even though they're going away from us. I'm basically targeting the trailers. He's got the leader. So he's got to close a little further to get his shot. So he takes a shot, and the missile flies out. He loses the missile in that, it burns out. He never sees anything happen. So now, because he is so high and we're closing, these guys are like disappearing below his nose. He rolls over and does a split S, gets his nose down, reacquires them. And now, because we're above 660, you're supposed to make sure you have positive G on the jet. Now, this is for a guy with 150 hours. I mean, I wouldn't have even, to be honest, it's like it's not even in my wheelhouse at that point. How many times have we done it? Like almost none. And he pulls some G. I got to pull some G. So he pulls some G on the jet, and he shoots. He said, well, you taught me if I shoot 1 and that doesn't work, shoot 2. So he hammers down 2 shots. And so first missile comes off, second missile. Now, see, I'm watching that this is coming out left. Now I'm still chasing the guy in front of me. And as he starts his turn, I continue to close. So I thumb back to aim 9. It's 11 o'clock in the morning on a hot desert background, whatever, screaming aim 9 mic tone. It's good. I'm inside 2.5 miles. I uncork it. This one, aim 9s usually are more direct, but it came off high. And I mean, I'm at about 3,000 feet now. Missile comes off high and then right into him. And this time the whole jet vaporizes. So that one's gone. So I'm like splash 1. And about that time, here comes the Combs missile. And I see the fireball to the left of me, and he's splash 2. And he says tally 2. And then he says splash 2, splash the second. But when he said tally 2, I'm thinking, okay, I've got that one. And so I look out, and I'm down about 500 feet now, and I pick up the 4th jet who is flown. This guy has come left. So I pick up him on the horizon. I'm like engaged, and his second missile, his tally 2, was inside his TD container because the F-1 and the MiG-23 were flying fingertip formation. So they're doing the Iraqi Thunderbirds. So as the first one blew up, the radar transferred locked. Second aim 7 takes out the second guy. Wow. So bam, bam. So he's got the second and third kill. And at this point, the guy that I'm chasing, I'm trying to pull lead on. I want to gun him. sorry, I'm a weapons officer, gun kill. It's just, that's what we live for. So he's in this, left-hand turn, it's a MiG-23. So he's state of Texas size, but he's only doing 350 and the wings are out. So as he starts his turn coming around, I start lining up, and that 2-degree gun cant is what's going to bite me, because he's at about 50 feet and I'm at 300 feet and I'm trying to pull lead, but I'm looking, we've got the little rolling hills. I'm like, I'm not going to impact the hill just trying to gun this guy, but I'm still trying to get some lead on him. So finally I'm like, it's not going to work. And for whatever reason, he reverses right there. And as he was coming left, I had Coma break right, because I don't know if he's trying to engage or whatever. Coma's about 8,000, 9,000 feet away from him, but he's up about 6,000 or 7,000 feet. So I said, break right. He breaks right over the top, and this guy reverses. And when he reversed, I'm dead six on him at 6,000 feet. Aim that, my radar wouldn't lock, but I'm an uncaged aim 9 right up the tailpipe. I mean, it's just, he's gone. And come right, and Coma's right over top of me. And the Salmon Pack East was the site, and that was an SA-2 SAM site. And up to this point, we can see Baghdad. I mean, I can see the buildings in the distance. And because obviously there's nothing out there, and of course with the sun's bearing down straight on them. But as soon as the fourth guy blew up, our RWR lights up, SA-2, SA-2, SA-2. Now we're way below, we're about 13 miles from him, and I'm at 300 feet. He's at 6,000, but I'm like, I don't care. Let's get out. So, 120 heading, we go southeast, dead away from him. Coma stays right over the top. He waits to pickle his bags. I mean, because I'm like, combat jet, which means get rid of your fuel tanks. So, I blow mine off. And he said, I didn't want to let him go till I could see. I go, we're doing 500 knots. They're going to be behind us. I didn't say, that's what we debriefed. I go, you're doing 500 knots. You could be right over top of me. They're not going to hit me. But he had good SA, great SA. And so he waits till he can see me get off. He gets a little bit to the side. He gets rid of his tanks. We run south. We start climbing up. Well, now we're talking to AWACS. And they're like, status. I'm like, splash 4. And I'm like, well, didn't you just listen to everything we said? Well, they couldn't hear all of the engaged talk. So they just kept basically broadcasting in big picture type stuff, which is good, what they should do. So we turn south, and I'm like, we need fuel. As we start climbing out, well, they go tanker. He gives me a vector of the tanker. Well, that's the tanker driver had been he's listening to the fight. And so he's already 50 miles north of the border. So he picks us up. By the time, we're running south pretty quick, but we pick him up he's 100 miles north of the border. Man, we do a combat turn. He just basically wheels around. We jump on. We're doing all the thumbs up and yeah. And he goes, "Did you get him?" Because we're supposedly calm out, and the boomer is back there. We're all giving each other the good signs. So he continues south, and I'm like, we still got missiles. We had our centerline tank, so we pickled off our wing tanks. Centerline bag left. We got missiles left, so we go right back on station, and we cap for another hour and a half. And in Coma's tape, you hear him. He's going, "Holy shit, holy shit!" But we didn't say a word. We don't debrief it. We don't talk about it. It's just like, there's more out there. We're gonna get them. That's all I'm like. We get back on station. It's hot left, cold, hot, cold. And we're looking, of course, anything, we're no contacts. There's nothing else. So finally we turn around and we exit, we're heading home. And Jiffy Jeff and Gito had joined up on us, not saying, the tanker took the pictures, but anyway, we all get together. So we fly together as a 4-ship for a little bit, and then they split. They wound up staying out for a little bit longer. Then we all join up to go home. So we're going to take a 4-ship home. And of course, I'm thinking, okay, we're doing our aileron roll across the base, Mig Kills, first Bitburg Mig Kill. This is great. I get the champagne. So the Tigers, Clausen had put, when he left Bitburg, he put a bottle of Russian champagne in a case, do not open, or, open in case of war. And it was for the first Tiger Mig Killer. And that's, in my mind, I'm like, I get the champagne. I'm getting the champagne. So we get, as we're vectoring back down to Alcarge, of course, we've already pickled our tanks off. So we come in, and I'm trying to, we're going to do aileron rolls, but I don't want to get in trouble, but I'm kind of a sure foot. We come in, and now it's the sandstorm, big storm, field 0-0. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This, so we didn't have to worry about doing that. Now we're just worried about, am I going to be able to land? Well, Jiffy and Geraldo have plenty of gas, so they divert, they go to Dhahran. But Coleman and I, we don't have enough gas to divert. So we come back in, and all we had was a tack can. So it was a portable tack can, which means it was terrible. Kind of lined you up, and you're just praying you got to the runway. And we come in, and we landed 0-0 in that. I mean, I touched down without seeing the runway. I flew the tack in radial, and I just kept getting lower and lower. And I had Coma back in a 2-mile trail. And when I touched down, I could see, I picked up like the 3,000 foot marker, coming in. And so the Eagle can stop in no time. Plus we're a lot lighter without fuel since we were empty. Just kept rolling out. And then and Coma lands. I know he touches down, same thing. He can't see anything. We get down there. I'm just trying to clear the runway so that he's got the full runway to go. And all of a sudden it just lifts away. Now it's clear a million. I'm like, we're going to take off and come back and do an aileron. We taxi in. So we taxi into the combat turn. And the weapons guys, and of course by this point they know now that I either come back through the radio or whatever, but that we had Mig Kills, and missiles are gone, tanks are gone, and of course for the combat turn guys, every day it's getting pretty boring for them. So they're loading tanks and they're loading missiles, and the guy's grabbing the umbilicals. The weapons guy comes over, he's shaking the umbilicals. He goes, "I'll bring them to you." And I mean, it was awesome. So we get full fuel. The jets turn. We take them in, taxi in, shut it down. And of course, everybody converges, and it's a great feeling because of all the work that everybody does to go into it to make it happen. So I mean, that's a real shiner for the squadron.
Let me take you back then to go through some of the things that you described. So the first thing is you had to feel a little sorry for the first fighter wing with their big kill box. Yeah. I'm trying to understand how. So you guys go out there. You effectively go out as a 2-ship. The other two sort of follow up. How is it that the 6 first fighter wing guys have not got gas and come back onto the cap to replace you?
I don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
I mean, the only thing I can think of at that point is because that's. I mean, and later on, I want to cut to one other. When Biggs and Vegas, or Vegas and Giggs, Heeman, and Bigham and Broom, that was actually a 6-ship. So Geraldo and I were part of that. So what we did was we kept 2 on station, 2 on the tanker, and 2 making the transit.
Yeah.
And we actually were on our way to the tanker, Biggs, and then we're on the way back to the station, and Giggs and Vegas got engaged. And then they rolled off. They go to the tanker. We're inbound as Biggs and Boo Boo were chasing these guys down to Baghdad.
Yeah,
Al Taqada.
That's what you would think they would do.
And you would think. But that's why I said the different squadrons, everybody kind of had their own way of how they plan things out. And I know some people were adamant. Their 4-ship was on station. 4-ship went to the tanker. 4-ship came back, and I was like, I'm keeping somebody on station. You guys, I didn't care. We had to do it singles. Somebody goes and gets gas while we keep, we're on station for a reason.
So the next question.
And I mean, I don't know what happened that drove that, but once Bulldog had put us there, clearly they weren't letting anybody else in. We basically, we've got that covered. We're going to have you guys covered. I don't think they were as fully in on the game plan from the frag as since it was more impactful to us than it was to them, because we're like, we're not even going to be in the game.
Yeah.
So
there's the next question then, obviously, is so you initially think you've got a 2-ship that you're targeting. Turns out to be a 4-ship. What do you think they were doing? So it's 2, so it's 3 MiG-23s and a Mirage F1. Is that correct?
Correct.
What do you think they're doing then?
Well, they're flying fingertip.
Yeah.
And I think
they're doing anything tactical?
No, I think they are basically, this was when they were husbanding all the aircraft. They were bringing them back into Baghdad. And I think this, like I said, this was across country. They were trying to figure out a window that had the least number of airplanes out there that was the easiest for them to go. They only had 1 ground radar that could control them. and Compass Call took that out. But they took off. They drove southeast a little bit and then turned northwest. And I think they were just trying to get those jets. That was when, Saddam had started sending them, unbeknownst to us, he was sending them to Iran.
Yeah.
And then, we had several guys that had an opportunity that were unable to convert. And that's why we put those caps out there and started blocking for anybody that was coming that way. But like I said, I always thought it was second lieutenants that were just, hey, Ahmed, you're taking it to Baghdad. I don't want to go. I don't want to fly today. So, but there was zero tactical. They were not aggressive, obviously, hostile towards us. At least that was not their intent, was to get those jets somewhere in Baghdad to protect them and come out and fight at another time. So, and I couldn't even tell you if they had weapons on them, to be honest.
Right.
From the conversion, I couldn't, with the wings out like they were set up. And as it turns out, what I'm finding out now is they were probably air to ground models.
Right.
So, and that was from the other book that Doug wrote, Disco, and he had a pretty good. He had gone somehow. He got to the reviews, but he knew which squadrons they were from, and this was the two squadron. Apparently, the Iraqis hated the air to ground flogger as much as anybody else did. This thing sucks, but I think it was the 94th Squadron, and then the F-1EQs there was one of them that was flying, which I do have a unique story on for training for the workup. I'll get back. I know we're time-wise, we're
okay.
Deep.
Okay.
Real short, not to break away from the subject. The French invited us down in November to come fly. They had the Iraqi F-1s that they were building, and the airbase Montemousson, and the airbase commander had gone to Maxwell. I'm from Alabama. He loves Alabama. So they put me on the ground. I fly him in my back seat to go up and fly against. He let us do whatever we wanted. I mean, we had guys that were looking at their jammers and systems and radars, and I mean, they're actually really good airplanes. And even talking to their pilots, the French pilots, they go, "Oh yeah, we wish we had this." So we sell this to everybody else, but we can't get it ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we had that intel. So I mean, from that perspective, we definitely. Their jammers were great. Their radars, their digital RWR, all of their systems were really good systems. It's just not a high G fighting kind of airplane.
One of the things that I think Disco and I wrote, so I think Disco wrote the MiG-23 book for Osprey, and I think he worked with Tom Cooper, and Tom Cooper is very well connected to the the Middle Eastern Air Forces, Iraqi Air Force in particular. So. But one of the things that Disco and I wrote in our book, Eagle Engaged, about your kill, and this may have been from my interview with you at the time, was that you had said you radio coma and said come out of lock because you don't want to trigger their roar. I had always sort of understood that the APG-63, if it was in the TWIS mode, the track while scan mode, it wouldn't trigger an adversary, radar warning system. Yeah. Was that true for the F-1EQ?
We did not normally use track while scan because the targets, even though it was an upgraded radar, the targets were wobbly goblins, if you will. I mean, they were the headings would swap around because it's when it's in track while scan, it's trying to keep track of an area and expand that, and it just the raw data was so much better being able to watch that. Once they, we're able now to run the cursors over it and see heading and airspeed and Mach and altitude without locking them up. So that was one of the things. And I think because of the ID matrix, we had a tendency, it's just an Eagle thing. Everybody has a tendency to lock and get all the data. And in this case, because we already knew what altitude they were at, we know that they're hostile. When they turned, I just said, just don't lock them, don't spike them. Yeah. And even though TWIS might not have, it's such a high power radar that it might have. So I wasn't even thinking along those lines. I was just like, just don't lock them. Just leave it and sweep. And that also forces us in normal sweep, we covered a much larger area. And again, I was more worried about somebody swooping around on us than the guys that were running cold at the time. So Coma's searching 20. He's searching the ionosphere up here, and I've got everything low to responsible for.
Were you surprised that, I mean, was the radar performance such that you would expect not to be able to pick out two individual aircraft that are in fingertip formation? There was a raid mode, wasn't there, in the Eagle? I don't know if that had gone by the time you got there, or if you just didn't use it. But would that have helped?
Yeah, RAM.
RAM.
Yeah, raid assessment mode. Again, it was the concept was good. The reality was it wasn't that good. I mean, if they weren't maneuvering at all, but I mean, we were whoever we were fighting, the aggressors, everybody else, they're doing the right on top of each other until they explode. You don't see them, and if you're in RAM, you're going to miss it because they're outside of that window so quick. I think we were looking for the best employment in a worst case scenario, as opposed to the easiest, very simple employment by the adversaries in this case in a very easy scenario. But our radar in raw sweep, and again, when the Soviets are going, well, we can track 10 targets, that meant they could get 10 hits. Whereas, with track while scan, and now with the data link and all the other things going on, you are able to track all of these targets because you're getting the inputs from everybody. If somebody else is locked to them or if somebody else has got on the sweep, you're seeing all those targets, you're seeing their vectors, what their airspeeds and altitudes are. So the way the data feed now is so integrated, you don't even have to, number one, you don't have to talk. Number two, you don't have to lock, with able to see that. So again, the information flow is so much better now than what we used to have to do or to count on, getting the raw hits.
So last nerdy question, then I'll move on to some other types of questions. But so you did say that you use the EWWS to track these guys. So I know you won't go into specifics, but for anybody who's not familiar with that, that's an IFF system that's interrogating the Soviet or the Russian made IFF equipment. So that's how you're able to see them. Was it you, OP? It may have been someone else who said to me that after these kills, the Iraqis went out and they actually snipped the wires.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I was told that because they said we don't want to be tracked. I mean, they didn't know for sure, but I mean that's one of those things. Anything that they're putting out on the airplane, and so that's what I was told shortly. I mean, like a few months after, was that they had intel because when they captured the jets, were at different fields, that everything was cut on the cables to those systems.
That's really interesting. You think you just take the control heads out?
Yeah. Well, you don't want to change up the weight and balance, then you got to send it back through the FAA and do this and do that.
I think it was interesting. The Serbians, or the Yugoslavs rather, they had, I think, based on that experience, they did the same in 1994 when Denney flight I think started. They did the same thing, turned all that stuff off. So okay, I wanted to ask a little bit about. I mean, I know you're OP. I hope you don't mind me saying it online, but I know you're a man of faith. Did any of the Iraqis survive? I mean, do you think about the human aspect? Is there a luxury in inverted commas that allows you to do that, or do you have to be sort of fatalistic about it and stoic and just say, it's fighting men in fighting machines, conducting war, and that's what happens?
Right. Well, that question was asked. I did an interview. There's a picture in your book that it's Coma and I, but we're actually being interviewed by Connie Chung on Good Morning America or NBC News, whatever the one was. And she was pregnant, so she was supposed to be in theater. And I'm like, Connie, you're my favorite, and whatever. Now I know her politics. I'm like, I don't even want to talk to you. But she asked that question. She goes, "How do you feel about killing civilians?" And this is way prior to woke and everything else. It's like, well, they kind of came down and attacked the Kuwaitis, and they're, killing our allies, and we're here to put them back in their place. So I've got no qualms about it. That's what we do. That's called war. I think the rules of warfare, not everybody fights by the same rules. I think the West upholds a pretty straightforward gouge. The moralistic side. we have rules of warfare, the things that we try not to do, to say, it was like when the guys came out and we had one in the chute. And I said to myself, I'm not going to shoot him while he's in the chute, because that's a common courtesy, if you will. It's like he can't defend himself. But the second he hits the ground, if I could have strafed him, I'd have come back and taken him out, because the Germans, they had 300 airplanes and only 75 pilots. Well, that pilot is an asset to their Air Force. He's as much of a weapon system as the airplane. So, I mean, thinking in that mentality, again, we didn't do it. We didn't come back. But I mean, the thought went through my head. So when I was asked that, I do look at it like that. I'm fighting for my country. He's fighting for his country. When you strap that jet on, we have a contract. It's mutual combat. And if you die or I die, and I mean, my family's not gonna, they're gonna be sad, but it's not going, oh my God, I can't believe you killed him. It's like, well, we're in combat. I mean, that's my dad lost so many friends. I lived at Fort Benning, and one day the family's next door, and the next day they're gone. It was because when their dad died, they're no longer allowed to live on base. And you're like, sorry, that's a side story.
No, it's
you watch We Were Soldiers Once and Young. My dad was in that unit. And they just weren't prepared for it. So back to us, even in my faith, there's the defense of our Christianity and our values and our system. And in this case, I had no qualms about it. Now, if I was tasked to bomb the middle of a city, I'm not sure how I would do that. I mean, again, strategic targets, tactical targets, and we always say in a big war you're going to have some losses. But I mean, we were all there with the same goals, and the issue wasn't, we expected to lose airplanes and to lose people, and we did a lot better. I mean, obviously we still lost people, but I mean, we expected that to happen. And I mean, as one of the colonels said, he said, you find a quiet place at night and you go to your maker and you talk to him about it, and that's what he puts you in the position that you should be in, and kind of. If forgiveness is required, if you will, but I mean, it never became an issue for me.
Just briefly, I mean, we'll wrap up here, but briefly, OP, what was your experience like then going back to non-combat operations? I mean, how were you perceived by the community? Are you treated differently because you've got some kills? Is it easy, difficult? Does it not matter for you to fit back into non-combat flying? You go from that kind of experience, which must have been surreal, to I mean, nothing about flying fast jets is mundane, right. but by on that scale, it's the modernity of just normal peacetime ops.
Yeah, I think for the most part, all of us who had Mig Kills understood that it could have been anybody. We were just in the right place at the right time. I felt like the training level that our units, I mean, it could have been our lowest second lieutenant to as even Colonel Rick Parsons, et cetera. You're in the right place. You employ the way we've trained. You're doing the job that we trained to do. It's an honor to have done that, or an honor. It's exciting. It's our mission that we train for. Coming back, I think there were guys who we didn't, it takes a while before you run into everybody, and something you're like, holy cow, I didn't know you that, but to find out that, like Mole Underhill and Dave Prather and some of the guys up at Ingerlick, and Muddy, like I said, run into them like, either, of course, I knew Cheese and JB and Clouseau and Caesar, et cetera. But I think the opportunity to get to go out and talk to the units, and one of the things that helped us was we had a Colonel Bennett who had been in Vietnam, flew F-4s in Vietnam. He came over as the vice wing commander from Bitburg to on-site. He was filling the vice wing commander role with Colonel Horner and Colonel Johnson. He shared a lot of his experiences from Vietnam, and it was talking about the tanker. He said, you're not really good until you can go up and tank without touching the stick. So you had to do it just rudder only. And I mean, we were getting good at tanking, trust me. But to reiterate what Clouseau said, the tanker was some of the scariest parts those first couple of days because we're in the middle of a storm. I mean, we're plus or minus 20 feet bouncing all over us. I felt like I was running downhill. I'm behind a KC-10 and serious vertigo. And I'm like, I got to break. I got to try this again just to get up there. I mean, here I've I've probably have 50 hours of tanking in the last 3 weeks. But it became old hat, and the tankers got better too. They trust us, we trust them, and everybody. To see so many airplanes get across the tanker, whereas you get out red flag, you need 2 hours. We're getting it all done in 35, 40 minutes. 64 airplanes going north. But to get out and tell our story and to relate how our training impacted, whether it be the Red Eagles, whether it be those 4v4s, the BFM. One of the things they would not let us do when we got done, we're like, okay, take the tanks off, take the missiles off. We need to do some BFM because here we've been out there for 4 or 5 months. We haven't flown any real tactical flying. I mean, we're killing Migs, but we're not getting, we're not pulling G's. We're not doing some real employment. And there's a complacency. And you look back and go, that's what happened when they came out of Vietnam. They come back and say, well, it's peacetime Air Force, gentlemen. And I think we went back with, we need to go right back to the basics. And, when we hit the ground, of course, I went from there back to the weapons school. And I mean, you talk about getting Facebook. I'm like, I haven't run a tactical intercept radar, but you got Mig Kills, man, right place, right time, to get back on the step. And nobody gave us a free ride at that point. I mean, they were all, hey man, tell me about, telling your story. We were all sharing stories, but it helped from there was a celebrity to it, because that's what we all wanted to do. We all wanted to get F-15s, then we all wanted to get Mig Kills.
Yeah.
So when you're running around with your friends, and I had to have the opportunity when, as a weapons school instructor, I would go to the different units, and of course they want to hear the Mig Kill. So I've told this story. There was a period that I told, it was at least once a month for a period of a couple of years. And that's great. I mean, I love this opportunity. And it's like today, it allowed me to look back. I haven't done it in quite a long time. But again, to pass on the lessons learned and how important the training was and how important the discipline is and why we set those standards at that level. And I think that paid off because guys like Big Behinds and Tonka Rose and the hundreds of lieutenants that I've seen come through that even as an 06, and I'm talking about one day you're going to be in this situation and you got to think about, what are you going to do? And to be able to be, because it makes it more realistic for them. I'm not just reading them something out of a book. So I think that was the opportunity or the the soapbox to get on to go, guys, these are the things that are still important and why the building block approach in our training and why we train so hard at the very basic level. Because you get over there, you're not going to have an opportunity to go out and fly some BFM. You're going to have been flying caps for 6 months, and now you're going to be in a fight for your life, in a knife fight. And those skills you have to hang on to. But if you haven't done it and have it in your mind, again, flying against the Migs, doing the other things. So those all paid off. I think that was what the biggest opportunity was because, Cheese went to Kadena. I went wherever, back to Eglin, and, we rotate all of us rotated around and we all ran into each other later at Southwest. But, it's just been a great opportunity. And I mean, it gave me the opportunity to do some things that maybe I wouldn't have been able to stay in the Eagle, but, because you have that experience, they want to keep that in there and help to keep it growing. So.
It was interesting, Opie, when you were talking earlier and you were talking about, I think you said it was maybe Bigham who was saying that he wanted his lieutenants to go. And you sort of made the point that in 15 years time, all the colonels would have obviously retired and the lieutenants would be the only people with combat experience. Obviously this was all happening in early 91. And then I think the Eagle kills was deny fight 94, maybe 95, 3 or 4 years within 3 or 4 years. But since then, really nothing. I mean, obviously there were some drones. The Strike Eagle's got 70 or so drones in an amazing feat of airmanship a few months back, but nothing in terms of sort of, interactive air-to-air combat against a a near peer threat, let's say.
Right.
Are you engaged with the current crop of fighter pilots? Are you asked to come by the weapons school and talk about your kills? How are you making sure that the experiences and the lessons learned are being passed on to the current generations?
Um, because I'm at Eglin, I've done the B course graduation for the 58th twice. Thank you guys, Gorillas, Rage, uh, for the F-35 classes. And the last class that I did was just a couple months ago. I think it was in May. And three or four of the six guys were all prior service, had done other things in the Air Force, had gotten to pilot training. I mean, one of them said, he goes, I'm going to be retired as a major. So, I mean, for him to get to the F-35, he basically he's going to have two assignments. F-35, he's probably going to be back to back, and then he's retiring.
Wow.
But to be able to sit down with them and talk about, what we went through and the thing, and of course they cover such a gamut of missions, and the capabilities are so different, et cetera. And I go, given all of that, it's still really the same. It's still a combat mission. You're still got a human element. You still have systems that can go wrong. It's always going to be somebody out there who's better than you, or you need to think like there's always somebody out there better than you. And I think that's my contact with them. Weapons school, not so much. I know Top Gun. I've been to Top Gun several times. Top Gun did Mig Killer debriefs when they were putting their kids through the classes, and I've done that several times. So that's pretty good. I'm not gonna say the Air Force isn't historically oriented, but I'm on several Navy blogs, and I mean those guys relive everything. We're still Battle of Korea, Battle of Vietnam, and but they names, dates, places, who did what to whom and everything, and I that's pretty impressive. It's like I said, I brought my list with all the names of all the guys who had impact. So because sometimes some guys are really good, and I feel like I've got a really good memory, and doing it, but you go to a reunion and it's like, okay, what's that guy's name? We flew 100 missions together.
Yeah.
But catching up. So.
Well, that's interesting. I think one of the things that I hear a lot about the Air Force is the loss of lessons learned, and or forgetting lessons learned. And so it's great that you've been engaged with the guerrillas, and you're still doing that piece. And maybe the Air Force does need to take a bit of a leaf out of the Navy's book. And hey, well, that is time for me. I'm out of time.
You're a little late for you.
it's a little late for me, but again, for anybody listening, don't worry if you're thinking, well, there's some things I'd like to ask Opie. If you're subscribed to the channel and you're at the top tier, then come back, and Opie will be with us in September. He can answer your questions live. You'll be able to join a call. But Opie, for the moment, then, thanks so much once again for the opportunity to talk to you. Tom, Opie's dad, Tom, if you're listening, I hope you enjoyed this. And
he'll definitely get to see this one.
I look forward to meeting you again some point soon. So, Opie, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Honored, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for all the stories, and for everybody else, sign up. And I'm subscribing immediately. It's such a great channel.